Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Patrick DeRay, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to say thank you for attending our third quarterly meeting of the year. I'm always wondering if summer's a good time to do something of this order, and by your attendance today, it's proven out that even the summer vacation schedule hasn't necessarily interfered with our ability to meet on a quarterly basis. So thank you for your attendance. It's good to see everyone. A lot of familiar faces and actually some new faces in the crowd. A lot of our folks as well to answer all of our questions as we go through the various presentations. This meeting is being webcast, as most of you have come to know, so anyone who isn't able to physically attend today's meeting can actually participate via the webcast. There's actually a process for submitting a question or even just making a comment, and I'll try to get feedback from my staff who are monitoring that webcast to see about any questions or comments that have come through. The process for doing that, for those listening in, is to send us an email at barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Again, that's barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. All right, I think the address is also in a note section of the agenda on page 2 of the agenda. So you can also find that address there. All right, we have a really busy agenda today. We tried to squeeze as much as we could into this agenda. It's allotted for 3 hours. We also have a follow-up regulatory workshop that we have piggybacked on this day to try and take advantage of everybody's availability for the bar advisory group meeting. So try to capture as many people here for that workshop as well. That'll begin at 2 o'clock sharp, because I think it's scheduled for 2 hours in this very same room. It's a regulatory proposal looking at minor services and something new that we would like to introduce called a pre-service inspection, and some of the procedures that would be envisioned as part of the pre-service inspection. This is kind of a follow-up to some of the legislation that was introduced last year that was unsuccessful and did not get signed by the governor. Actually, one of them did, but it was joined with a bill that did not get signed, so both bills ultimately did not become law. Those two bills, AB 873 and SB 778, were the two bills that are kind of prompting us to look at this from a regulatory standpoint and see what we can do through regulation as opposed to legislation. All right, those are my welcome and introductions. We typically go around the room at the dais here and introduce the advisory group members, so let's do that, starting with my left, far left, Denny Bowen. Denny?
Yes. Denny Bowen, Automotive Maintenance and Repair Association.
Good morning, Art Rocha, Royal Quick Lube, here with Automotive Oil Changers Association.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
Years, Independent Automotive Professionals Association.
George Ritz, California Automotive Teachers.
Lou Anapolsky, California Midas Dealers Association.
Tracy Renee, Automotive Service Councils of California.
Megan McKernan, Auto Club of Southern California.
Elisa Reinhardt, California New Car Dealers Association.
Jack Miladonov, California Auto Body Association.
Jonathan Morrison, Auto Advisory Services.
Keith Going, ICAR.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to point out, yes, our newest member, I should have mentioned at the outset, Joanna Johnson, representing the Automotive Oil Change Association. That was just happened in the in between our last meeting in April and today's meeting. Couldn't be here today to attend her first meeting, so I didn't catch the name again. I'm sorry. Art. Thank you very much, Art. All right. We are through the welcome and introductions and now ready to move on with the rest of the agenda. As I said, we're going to be on a fairly tight time crunch here to get through all of the presentations and take in all the various comments and questions and concerns that might arise from the various presentations. So I'm going to try and move us swiftly. We might not even have much time for even a small bathroom break or anything like that. So we're going to try and push through this as aggressively as we can. If there is the need to use the facilities, they are out these doors and then off to the right prior to getting to the guard's desk, and then left at the end of the hallway there, and you'll find the restrooms. All right, let's move on. Department of Consumer Affairs update. News and updates from John Perry.
Good morning.
Welcome, John.
Try to be respectful of your time here. Got a few updates for you. Good morning. Thank you, Chief DeRay and advisory group members, for the opportunity to be with you here this morning. My name is John Perry. I am the legislative manager of the Department of Consumer Affairs Division of Legislative and Regulatory Review, and I'll be providing a few important leadership changes that have occurred at the department and agency since your last meeting in April. On May 19th, Governor Brown announced the appointment of Deborah Hoffman as Undersecretary at the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. Ms. Hoffman previously served as the Deputy Press Secretary in the Governor's office since 2015. On July 1st, after 37 years of public service, 17 of which were at DCA, DCA's Deputy Director of Legal Affairs and General Counsel, Doretha Johnson, retired. We all wish her well. Upon Doretha's retirement, Governor Brown appointed Ryan Marcroft to lead DCA Legal Affairs. Ryan has served as the Assistant Chief Counsel at DCA since 2016. This week, DCA also welcomed Grace Arupo Rodriguez as Assistant Deputy Director of Legal Affairs at DCA. Grace previously served as Deputy Director of Legal Affairs at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Finally, DCA Deputy Director of Administrative Services, Tanya Corcoran, accepted a new position as the Chief Deputy Registrar at the Contractor State License Board. With 28 years of service at DCA, Tanya began her new position at CSLB this week. The recruitment to fill this vacancy is currently underway. The department recently released its strategic plan for 2017 to 2020. Similar to the Bureau's strategic plan, the department's executive team developed this new plan with the assistance of DCA's Solid, setting goals for new, more innovative ways to protect both California's consumers and its licensed professionals. The new DCA strategic plan is available on our website, www.dca.ca.gov. The department's Office of Public Affairs has begun filming consumer testimonials for the Bureau. These vignettes will be placed on BAR's website to highlight how the Bureau helps consumers. Filming is taking place in different regions throughout California, and we anticipate these videos will be available later this year. This concludes my update from the Department of Consumer Affairs, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Can we have any questions, comments from the advisory group members? None. Seeing none, we'll go to the audience. Charlie.
Yes, Mr. DeRay and committee, I'm Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals representing Motors. I had the great pleasure of meeting with you, Mr. DeRay, and the previous director, who was seemingly quite involved in some stuff that was of interest to us, which was a couple of kind of minor issues, in my view, to implement that had some potential for having significant impacts on our credits for Smog check. And all of a sudden, the director seems to be gone and says that he is going on to bigger and better things. I've gotten no messages or no indication whatsoever as to where he's gone. So I will ask the question, what happened to our director, and why is he gone? Because the news indicated that he was going on to other things, but I see I'm getting no messages as to where he went.
Other than he left.
Yeah, he left to pursue some other opportunities that presented themselves. I'm not exactly sure where he went on to for employment, where he's actually working. The rumor was that he did go on to work with a a local firm, but I'm not exactly sure.
That's very
the name of it.
interesting in that we had very significant discussions about some simple possibilities which seem to be no longer being discussed, so we wonder if that has any connection. Thank you.
None whatsoever.
Oh.
Thank you very much, John, for the update from DCA. You should do radio broadcasts, so it's a very distinguished voice you have. All right.
Thank you.
Legislation and regulations updates, Sergi, or Isam El Morshedi. Before we have Sergi give his update, I failed to do something I regularly do, is introduce my executive team as Doug Bellotti here, Assistant Chief Doug Bellotti, please stand up. Tim Corcoran, Deputy Chief for Field Operations and Enforcement. Clay Leake, Deputy Chief for Smog Check Operations and Technical Services Division. Patty Wool is not here with us today. She's on vacation attending a family wedding this week. Zach Richardson, he's our do-all assistant and support for the executive office. You see his name quite regularly in emails and present updates and information distribution to the group. So thank you, Zach. All right, Sergi.
Good morning.
Off and away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to provide a legislation and regulations update. We will start with the pending legislation. First, AB 188 is a bill that would impact the Vehicle Retirement and Replacement Program. This was passed out of the State Assembly and ordered to the Senate at the end of May, and was currently pending referral to the Appropriations Committee. There was a hearing scheduled for this week that was postponed. This bill would require ARB to amend guidelines for the retirement and replacement option within EFMP to consider incentives to purchase light-duty trucks that mirror existing guidelines for the purchase of minivans. This would be required by July 1st, 2019. And let's see. Next is AB 630. This is another bill that would affect the Vehicle Retirement and Replacement Program. This bill was also passed out of the Assembly and ordered to the Senate on May 31st, and was recently heard in the Transportation and Housing Committee as recent as last week. This bill would require ARB and BAR to update the EFMP guidelines by expanding allocation of funds for retirement and replacement option to mobility option for car sharing and public transportation vouchers. And the bill would also require ARB and BAR to set specific annual goals for the retirement or replacement option and post that information online. AB 1005 is a bill that would impact the department as a whole, relates to citation fines, and it would require that any citation issued by the Department of Consumer Affairs containing an order to pay an administrative fine would also include an order of abatement period of about 30 days, granting time for abatement of the violation before an administrative fine would become effective. AB 1274 would extend the smog check exemption for new model year vehicles to 7- and 8-year model year. This bill was passed out of the Assembly and ordered to the Senate on May 31st. Was pending hearing in the Appropriations Committee, but that hearing has been postponed. This would require ARB to extend a biennial smog check exemption, and owners would instead pay a $24 annual abatement fee on their registration, $3 of which would be deposited to the Vehicle Inspection and Retirement Fund. The remaining $21 would be used on Moira grant voluntary emissions reduction programs for different kinds of purposes. AB 1679 relates to auto body labor rate surveys. The provisions in this bill would replace those established by last year's Department of Insurance regulations that went into effect beginning this year. The bill would require redevelopment of the methodology for determining labor rates for auto body repair, and it would require insurers to use labor rate surveys in specific geographic areas if they did elect to use the surveys. And much like the regulations established earlier this year, would prevent insurers from steering an insurance claimant from seeking repairs at a shop of their preference. SB 638 relates to heavy-duty motor vehicles, and this would require the adoption of regulations for emission inspection and compliance standards for heavy-duty vehicles used for commercial purposes. This bill hasn't had much movement since earlier this year. There was a hearing set initially. It was canceled and has not yet been rescheduled.
Yeah, it's been moved as a 2-year bill, or labeled as. Okay.
And up next, we'll go over some regulations that are currently in process at BAR. Mobile automotive repair advertising regulations would establish advertising requirements for mobile automotive repair businesses. BAR filed this rulemaking package with OAL in April. It was disapproved over some minor illustration of text within the second 15-day public notice period. So we've gone out for the third public comment period to illustrate that change in the text, and we will be resubmitting this rulemaking file shortly, with adoption expected later this year. The electronic documents and consumer authorization regulations would allow for electronic estimates and authorizations and transmission and storage of repair transaction documents. It would also reorganize estimate, work order, and invoice provisions to more closely align with automotive repair transactions and clarify related language as necessary. We've workshopped this a few times, and this rulemaking package was actually recently approved by the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and BAR plans on filing a notice of OAL within the next register.
Yeah, if all goes well, we'll get this to OAL on their next filing date of next Tuesday, and then they have some time a little bit of time to review, and then hopefully get it published in the official register. I think it was August 4th.
August 4th, yes.
August 4th. So stay tuned. That should be, and that'll begin the 45-day public comment period. So we'll get another opportunity for everybody to weigh in on it. But we're getting closer. After how many years, John? John's my tracker on regulations.
We're coming up on 4, but
Yeah.
2's counting.
Yeah.
BAR 97 specifications, regulations would modernize the BAR 97 equipment standards for Smog check stations by removing dedicated analog phone line requirement and requiring communication directly with the BAR 97 for the LEPFIT, and would also update minimum computer hardware and software requirements. This regulation was workshopped last fall, and BAR has kind of been informing the industry of the impending regulations through ET blasts in 2016 and recently this spring, and in our recent release of the Automotive Repair and Smog Check newsletter. This regulation is currently under DCA-wide formal review, and pending review after that by our Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. We expect to hopefully get this one filed in the near future as well.
So we'll have an update from Clay Leak on the Cal Vista project, which will is kind of the technical part of getting the Bar 97 updated and what our plans are, but this is the regulatory requirement to do so, so they go kind of hand in hand, and he'll touch upon that as well in his presentation.
BAR's certified training instructors and institutions regulations would make requirements for certification of smog check training providers consistent with current licensing requirements, and would authorize training for compliance with laws and regulations. This bill, this regulation is currently under informal review, and after that, we'll move on to DCA-led formal review. STAR program cleanup regulations would delete outdated Gold Shield program provisions and amend STAR eligibility criteria, as well as revise STAR suspension process provisions to be consistent with the statute. This bill is also currently under informal review. And brake and lamp regulations would update handbooks and licensing applications for brake and lamp adjusters and stations, and would also update brake and lamp certificates. This regulation was also workshopped in the fall and is currently under preliminary review. Any questions?
Could I ask one question about, can we go back to 1274 for just 1 second?
Sure, absolutely.
Is that a cost analysis of what it's going to do to this department?
Yes, there has been an analysis. Greg, we've got one of our air quality engineers who's been also working on the bill and supplying technical assistance, if you will, and responding to committee concerns or issues or questions that come up. So, Greg, you can maybe fill us in on some of the details involving that.
Sure. I think the question was, how would this affect the Bureau on the bill? So as you can see, they are trying to make the Bureau fairly whole. They're trying to give a $3 piece that would go back to the Bureau as part of the analysis as we've gone through it. That comes close to making the Bureau whole, not quite there, but it does make us fairly close. Was that the question kind of financially, how that would affect us, or what all the impacts would be to the Bureau?
I'd like to know what the big picture would be.
The big picture, okay. So,
How many people are going to lose their jobs?
how many people are going to lose their jobs? Well, when you break it down on a per station basis, it is a fairly small number. But when you look at it as a whole, it definitely takes some vehicles out of the program. So, you're going to lose some repairs, you're going to lose some inspections, obviously. So it's about, when you look at it as it's a biennial cycle, so there's about 1 million vehicles in each one of those model years. So. Well, no, that's not exactly right. The numbers are slightly smaller now. You have to reduce that in half and then look at it as how that's actually going to play in. And we can get you the actual numbers for that. We've provided that to a few different folks, so we can definitely provide you the actual impacts and numbers.
Wouldn't a better analysis be, in taking cars out of the program, be by mileage rather than year?
Well, the Bureau did not obviously make the proposal as to taking the model years out of the program. There's been information provided on mileage. There's obviously tough things about doing that. How do you identify which vehicles are which and so forth? Model year's been kind of the consistent way that many programs throughout the other states within the U.S. have done it. It's just a simple way consumers kind of understand it. Good questions.
How many
George?
other states are?
Please, for those listening, and George Ritz with California Automotive Teachers, yes.
How many other states are doing it this way?
There are a number of other states doing it this way. Washington is already at a very high, I think they're at 9 model year exemption. Oregon is similar. They're moving towards a 9-year exemption. So many of the different programs. Texas is also high. Arizona is fairly high. So we definitely have other states that have gone to a much higher exemption rate.
Just a quick comment. John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition, our members have had a lot of discussion on this particular bill. In particular, because of the impact that we see that it could have on consumers, because now you're taking that 2 years into the 8-year period. We're looking at mileage and emission components that could be taken outside of the warranty period now, causing consumers more cost to do repairs. We have a lot of members that have invested a lot of money to go into the new emissions equipment. Granted, it isn't as expensive as the Bar 97 with dynos and everything, but the bottom line is they've still made a great investment looking to the future of their business. And now we're taking, just rough number, let's say it's less than 2 million cars out of the population by kicking this out 2 more years. So, you know, we voiced our opposition to this bill and our concerns to the author and the staff. And just for the record today, I wanted to make sure that everybody understood our concerns about this whole thing, because it impacts our members, the customers they serve, and we think it also has an impact on environmental vehicles that are going to fail within that period that aren't going to be tested. Thank you.
Tracy.
Tracy Renee with the Automotive Service Councils of California. One of the things I was just curious about, well, a few things, on this bill is the roadside testing. Has there ever been any roadside testing for 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old vehicles?
We do a fairly limited amount of roadside testing on the newer model year vehicles. We do a special study with their resources board to grab some data every year on the newer model years, but we'll be presenting a little bit later on the roadside data in our annual report, and so I'll go through some of that at that point. But we're really focused on tailpipe testing because of the 2289 analysis that we do is really focused on comparing the Sierra study from 10 years ago to today. So we really focus on the older stuff out there.
And then I'm just curious, I know we brought this up last time, what is the average odometer reading of a 6-year-old vehicle, since that's what you can see with the smog testing?
That is a great question, Tracy, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but we do have that information. Sorry, it slipped right out.
Because I personally drive 2 hours a day. Every once in a while I might actually have a life and do more, but and I put 25,000 miles a year on my car. Okay, and I don't go anywhere. I just go to work and go home. So I just find it very interesting that we don't take that into account at all. And we have more vehicles on the road now than ever. Over 2.1 million new cars sold every year. Okay, adding to it, more and more people going into, driving for a living. I'll just say that. So we're increasing the mileage per driver. And the other thing is the average miles driven per registered, licensed driver is a lot higher than the numbers that we like to present that are vehicle miles, because people own more than one vehicle. So I think it's better analysis to look at licensed drivers in the state of California and the miles that they are driving. The other question I was just curious about, since we're trying to remove all the vehicles from the road, exactly how many vehicles with all the different programs that are going on, how many vehicles are being removed from registration in California every year right now? What's that guesstimated number?
So you're asking vehicles that get in accidents?
People crashing their car and voluntarily retiring it and going through these programs. Do we have a number on that?
I'm not going to have an exact number off the top of my head, Tracy, but we can definitely find out. We'll try to get them to you either by the end of BAG or shortly thereafter. Okay.
Another question, I was just curious. I know it's kind of like, it's almost like a cap and trade bill in a sense, Take some pollution here and move it over here, or vice versa, whatever, monies. But like Carl Moyer, a lot of that money is spent on heavy equipment versus this program is not necessarily buses and tractors and things like that. So I was just trying to understand that more as far as how that's, I mean, I know that program, we're always paying into that with the smog certificates and everything, so I understand that. But I think that there's, you know, I think we're ignoring pollution. Okay, we're ignoring the fleet. We're not going to manage the fleet because we want some money to go, you know, update the buses and the tractors and the this and the that. I just don't think that's good policy. So I think that another thing that nobody's looking at here, everyone says, oh, well, the numbers look good. Oh, is the Bureau lying? I mean, you know, the fail rate's so low for these vehicles. Well, the average consumer, like everybody in this room, yeah, what was that? You know, when it's time to smog our car, we then go, oh gosh, I got to smog my car, better go get my car fixed because my check engine light's been on for 3 years, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
pre-inspection repairs.
Right, so we're not getting actual numbers. Those reports are not actual. But thank you, I'm done.
Right, that's a great point, Tracy. And we do see out on the roadside inspections, regardless of model year, that it's significantly higher failure rates when you're just pulling a vehicle over versus right after a smog check where maybe it's been repaired or whatever before we ever saw it. Absolutely.
But we're not seeing the years we're talking about removing. That's my concern, is
Right.
nobody's caring to look at that. Because money is, we got to get the money. So, I'm done.
Thank you. Other comments? Jonathan?
Yeah, just piggybacking a bit on John Gallo's comments about the, you know, a lot of the emissions components are covered under a 7-year or 8-year factory warranty, where the customers paid for those repairs when they purchased the vehicle. And like Tracy said, there's a lot of people that drive for a few years without getting that check engine light taken care of because the car still drives, still gets them to work and such. So now we're going to be taking some of these vehicles outside of that warranty coverage, and I'm wondering whether you've had done some analysis on, you know, what are warranty claims rates generally within, you know, when you're getting that biennial smog check performed that's now being pulled, and any potential impact on the repair assistance program for the Bureau. Because of that, because now you have customers who, again, they paid for those potential repairs to their vehicles that are covered under warranty. They're not going to be covered under warranty once these are actually discovered in year 9 or so. You know, do you know, a lot of these components are very expensive. That could result in more applications for repair assistance funds. And I'm just wondering if there's been any analysis on that.
It's been discussed with the ARB, between BAR and ARB at a high level, but no, we have not seen any numbers that spell that out.
Jack Moladonna, California Auto Body Association. Let me just follow up on that because I think that's an important part of this bill. Obviously, it's a very controversial bill, and the impact on consumers. And I think the analysis is important because, as Jonathan was saying, if under current law, the 6 years when a consumer goes in for their first smog check, you know, and there's a problem, the consumer will have their, you know, emissions issues paid for by the manufacturer. So they don't have to pay for it. So, but if this bill passes, it'll kick it after the 8 years in the 9th year, and the consumer will end up having to pay out of their pocket. And I know that some of these repairs are very expensive, catalytic converter repairs and so forth. So we know there's going to be an impact on consumers. And I think based on some of the numbers that I've seen, I know it's going to be in the millions. We just don't know how many millions of dollars it's going to cost consumers. And I think that's a pretty significant issue that needs to be analyzed by DCA or BAR and really brought to the attention to the state legislature, because that issue has been raised, but it's no one's, you know, there isn't really any specific data or information on it. And I think that's a really important part of this this bill and the cost to consumers. So it needs to be looked at carefully, and the impact on consumers. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good points all the way around. Other comments? Moving on from the advisory group, Bud, I saw your hand come up first. Bud Rice.
Good morning, Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. We've done some analyzing as well, and although the numbers have a little bit of wiggle to it, we think the number is 2 million cars that are in play, so something around 2 million cars. If you take BAR's 2016 analysis of smog check, the number of fails usually is somewhere between 3, maybe to 5%, somewhere like that, and then I think what we've said this morning is roadside seems to be a little bit higher. But if you were to say 5%, that's 100,000 cars now on the road that would probably fail a smog test if they were to come in and have one done. 100,000 cars. So one of the things we've tried to make clear to the legislature, you got to be okay with 100,000 cars driving around that should be failing a smog test. You have to be okay with customers that are now out of warranty and are now out of pocket to make these repairs. You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with shops that have made investment in equipment that now they don't have 2 million cars to test. You have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with employees that don't have cars to test, so maybe you don't need them around anymore. So you have to be okay with that. And then lastly, you have to be okay with one agency, what I call reaching through the pipe to BAR and the smog check program that's up and running, and taking money out of that program to bring it over to use it for another program. You have to be okay with that. And we're not okay with that. And I think for the most part, I know it's politically hard for BAR to figure out what position BAR ought to have, but I don't think this is good for BAR either. You know, I think Nikki was asking, you know, what's the impact? Well, I saw the analysis. It was almost $200,000 in shortfall, but that's also 2 million cars that should be in the program that aren't. And when I was sitting here and I was listening, I think Tracy was making the comment, if you were just to let me use some weird numbers for a minute, and let's just say it's 1 million cars a year, kind of like you were saying a minute ago. Well, now you've eliminated year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? And if the fleet is 24 million cars, you could make a case that that's 12 million of them right there, okay? 12 million. Well, that's now cut the fleet down in half. So what we have considered to be an effective smog check program to help protect not only the environment, but for consumers as well, and the service providers that do that, you've cut the fleet in half. And we just don't think it's good policy. We'd like to see at least BAR, from your perspective, going, is this good for BAR or not? Is it good for the environment or not? And say something about that. We'd like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Another public member, Charlie Peters.
Mr. Peters, would you just like
Yes, hello, Mr. DeRay and committee. I'm Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. Heard a comment about diesels being proposed to be part of a ongoing inspection and repair program is what I thought I heard. And that bill, I think I heard that may have been put off as a 2-year bill. And so the question there, the interest here, is that going to be a part of the Bureau of Automotive Repairs jurisdiction, or where is that going to be? How's that going to be handled, and what kind of oversight is that proposed to have? Is my question number one, and I'll hold for an answer to that one.
Senate Bill 638, I believe you're talking about. That's Leva's bill. Details still being worked out, but right now, as it stands, I think a lot of the discussion is focused on the Air Resources Board having the responsibility for implementing that program. I believe the Bureau of Automotive Repair would have a consultative role, helping them to develop a program through regulation with some of the experiences from the light duty inspection program that we currently oversee, used to kind of advise the Air Board on the regulations and the implementation of that program.
Okay, my second point, or second question, has to do with the bill that's been gotten some discussion here, which I had the pleasure of testifying on in the Capitol. And it was kind of interesting how the pro side, which seems to include virtually every entity that matters, all the money guys, the tech guys, the car manufacturers, the enviros, everybody says, we need some pumps for our cabbage in the Central Valley and so on and so forth. So we got to go to these fancy autonomous self-driving electric cars that will need no services. Being orchestrated by South Coast is not supposed to have, in my view, to have any jurisdiction whatsoever over mobile source. With a lobbyist for Ford, whose president just was fired because he wasn't moving on the car services rather than car sales. So my question is, one that's been consistently asked over time, the PZEV warranties, which are 15 years, 150,000 miles, and what was stated by the South Coast gentleman in charge of South Coast was, just as our illustrious new car dealer representative over here, former new car dealer representative indicated, that we have a 770 warranty, and that apparently is a federal warranty. And what I pointed out on the side at that hearing was that we also have a California warranty, which is a PZEV warranty, which is a partial zero emissions warranty, which is 15 years, 150,000 miles, performance warranty, not parts, performance. So if it's check engine lights on, the law, I believe, requires that that car is diagnosed and repaired without charge. And since you can't even file a complaint on that, the consumer can't file a complaint unless they have a letter from the manufacturer refusing to fix a car that's covered under warranty, for their Every Sources Board to even consider the complaint, you kind of can't get there from here. And we've been encouraging an audit of that to find out if, in fact, we ever do fix any of these cars, which I've testified a number of times, we never fix any of them. We always have an excuse, oh, there isn't a label on the window, or, gee, it didn't rain last week, and so this car is not covered. And I think the state of California consumers are getting the shaft, and they've been getting it long enough. And it's time for somebody to take a look and find out if we ever do what we're required to do here. And I see no evidence that that is true. So when we can't even get a response to the second bite of the apple of the people trying to take away and confiscate your business, our business, the consumer's air, then I think we need some help here to improve what we're doing. We need somebody to audit and take a look at what's going on in this program that appears to be totally dysfunctional and full of nothing but lies and cheating. Question number two, we have two simple procedures that we have discussed. One is having a label on the car and indicating to the machine that it has a label that would indicate that it's under warranty that nobody even knows about and nobody cares about. And the other one is the car failed someplace else, giving that notice after the entries are made so that it can be audited and find out who out there is cheating, which we've been after getting that done since '92. We applied a copy of a letter to every person in the legislature, including the governor, signature required. We had a meeting with the Bureau of Automotive Repair and an agreement to start a pilot study to better manage this program within 45 days in '93. We're still waiting for that announcement, and we'd appreciate some action instead of all this noise that you come up here and hear that results in no benefits to the public whatsoever. This meeting should be brought to an end or do something to make it work a little better, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Others? Before we move on? All right. Thank you, Sergi. Greg? Thank you. We'll move on. Pre- and post-vehicle scanning for collision repairs. Jason Bartanen with the Inter-Industry Conference on Auto Collision Repair, also known as ICAR. Welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
Yes. How are things in Wisconsin?
Fantastic.
Cooler than
We had summer.
Sacramento.
Summer
I'm
was
sure.
last week, so we're
Yeah,
it's been
last
great.
week.
Last week.
Very good.
So, Jason Barton, Director of Industry Technical Relations for the Inter-Industry Conference on Auto Collision Repair. Give you an update on the most hotly debated topic in the collision repair industry for the last probably close to 24 months now, around collision repair diagnostics, more commonly and incorrectly, I believe, referred to as pre- and post-repair scanning, as it does deal quite a bit more in depth than just that. While scan tools and diagnostics may not be that novel to the automotive service segment, it certainly has become more active on the collision repair side of things as, we're used to using scan tools perhaps for restraint system, airbags, and anti-lock brakes. With the advent of all the advanced driver assist systems on today's vehicles, and the announcement from the majority of the vehicle manufacturers that sell in North America that all vehicles will have standard equipment of collision braking systems in the early 2021, 22 time frame. The collision repair diagnostics and pre and post scanning has become very, very hotly debated, with a lot of these sensors and cameras being located on the perimeter of the vehicle, in the grille for adaptive cruise control, and behind bumper covers. Certainly all the cameras that are incorporated into the glass, and also on the glass industry has been struggling quite a bit with these ADAS systems as well. Many vehicle manufacturers have now come out with position statements with regard to pre and post scanning, saying that every vehicle that's involved in a collision must have a pre-scan during the damage analysis process and must have a post-scan following collision repairs. Fiat Chrysler, Honda, Nissan are a few examples that we've got here. I believe this might fall under the 3365 as well, as following vehicle maker procedures when it comes to pre and post scanning. And then a lot of these systems certainly have calibration requirements following collision repairs that I'll touch on in a moment. Other vehicle manufacturers, General Motors, Toyota, and others have also taken positions on pre and post scanning. The Society of Collision Repair Specialists, SCRS, have also come up with a position statement, and ETI, the Equipment and Tool Institute, that deals with aftermarket scan tools and diagnostics, they too have come up with a position statement around pre and post scanning. There's been a lot of confusion around these terms, so ICAR has brought together a number of subject matter experts, conducted what we call repairability summits. So we now have developed, we have published now industry-developed and vetted definitions for pre-scanning, for post-scanning, and for post-repair calibration. So these are now industry-developed and accepted best practices with regard to these definitions, trying to get everybody on the same page with what is entailed in a pre-scan, as well as what is involved in a post-scan or clearing codes following repairs. Again, it's an area that we've typically not dealt with. We don't often work on drivability and emissions and exhaust systems. We're dealing with, again, collision repair, structural, welding, refinishing, et cetera. But now we've been really brought into the collision repair diagnostics world. And then again, the biggest piece that we've been missing, I think, in the industry that's now finally starting to get a little bit more recognition is that post-repair calibration or initialization. So there are a number of these systems, if the cameras or sensors are removed, or if the mounting locations are damaged, or simple things like the glass being removed and installed, these cameras require recalibration, re-aiming, and those procedures take quite a bit more effort than just a simple pre and post scanning, although we've certainly recognized that the pre-scanning is also a very good business practice to identify which of those components may be accident-related and which of those may not be related to the accident, to help in those insure and collision repair facility conversations at that level. In addition to our definitions, we've also held some repairability summits on the pre-scan process, the post-scan process, the post-repair calibration process, and most recently on the collision repair damage analysis position on how to approach the vehicle and identify which system the vehicle is equipped with, and how to identify if that system is functioning, what needs to be done, and then again going through the entire pre and post scanning. So again, these were published by ICAR, but developed and vetted by the inter-industry with vehicle manufacturers, collision repairs, insurance representatives, tool and equipment manufacturers, including a lot of aftermarket scan tool organizations as well. So we've published those best practices on the pre-scan process, as well as the post-repair calibration and post-scan process prior to giving that customer their vehicle back and making sure that it is roadworthy and that those systems are going to function properly. Again, the calibration and aiming has really been an area that we at ICAR have been trying to focus on because of the additional steps that are required. We've got an example here of a Ford F-150 with their 360-degree cameras. Now backing your truck out of the garage and knocking the mirror off is going to require this very detailed calibration process that not only requires special mats, a scan tool, and a degree in math to figure out where to place the mats. It's a very complex problem. So we're trying to share that information through iCar courses, through publications that we put out there. So there's an example of Ford targets for the 360-degree cameras. Honda's got a very complex procedure process as well for aiming their Honda sensing. So their cameras that are mounted in the windshield, again, trying to find the center line of the vehicle, and then decide, depending on the make, model, and year of the vehicle, the model of the vehicle, where to put those targets, the proper height, et cetera, so that those cameras are calibrated so it understands what is 1 foot versus 100 feet, so that it's able to see those vehicles in front of it, as well as making sure that it's not aimed too high or too low, and that these advanced driver assist systems do function properly, so that when we put the vehicles back on the road, we are not putting that customer in harm's way. We've published a lot of these, our best practices through iCar's Repairability Technical Support portal in our collision repair news section, which is available to everybody in the inter-industry. The majority of the RTS website is a subscription base to our iCar Gold Class professional businesses, to our Platinum individuals, but our collision repair news articles that include all of our best practices are available to anybody in the industry and are accessible 24/7 at rts.icar.com, i-car.com. So here's our examples of 3 of those best practices. So we've got our definitions that are part of your packet today, as well as our processes for pre-scan and post-scan. And then our most recent one is our damage analysis for ADAS identification and calibration requirements. So again, a step-by-step guide to how to approach vehicles for pre-scan, post-scan, and again, that post-repair calibration or aiming process. Another tool that we've developed on behalf of the industry is our OEM calibration requirement search. To my knowledge, this is the only tool of its kind in the industry. We have spent thousands of hours putting this calibration requirement search together so that collision repair professionals, insurance professionals don't have to take the time to research the information to identify which vehicles may be equipped with an ADAS system and when calibration is required. So currently we have coverage for the majority of 2016 model years. Our staff is currently working on 2017 model years, and we'll be going back into 2014 and 2015 as well, and hopefully all 4 of those model years will be available by the end of the year. So if collision repair professionals come in, can do a search by make, model, and year. I've selected a 2016 Honda Civic for this example. So we're not dealing only with high-end vehicles that have all these systems. You can get these on your Honda Civics and your Ford Fusions and every Subaru with the Subaru eyesight that's out there. So what this search function will do is we'll let you know if a vehicle might be equipped with an ADAS system. We don't currently have the technology tied into the specific vehicle itself that the repairer might be working on, but at least letting them know. For example, on our Civic here, it does come with the option of adaptive cruise control. It does come with collision braking. It does come with side view cameras, as well as a number of other features. We also let the technician and the repair professional know what the Honda name is for. So again, for adaptive cruise control, Subaru calls it their eyesight system, a Honda sensing system. So again, we're letting them know so when they go into service information, what terms that they might want to be looking for rather than the industry terms of adaptive cruise control, collision braking, et cetera. We also let the professional know where the camera and or sensors are located for that system. Again, a lot of these are behind bumper covers, in the grill area, in the windshield area, blind spot warning systems in the quarter panels or in the rear tail lamps. Whether or not a diagnostic trouble code will be set, and whether or not a malfunction indicator lamp will be set. So a lot of these vehicles don't have malfunction indicator lamps that will light if there's a problem with the system. That is a huge misconception in the industry. A lot of people think if there's no light, there's no issue. That is not at all accurate. So again, we're letting the professionals know whether or not a mill will turn on or not, to try to give them some information on that. And then again, whether or not a diagnostic trouble code will set. So if they look it up in their scan tool, and again, most of these will set a diagnostic trouble code if there is a problem with the system. And from there, we then let them know, again, with each of those cameras or those sensors, which events will necessitate a calibration. So again, a lot of times you'll see if the windshield is simply removed, even if that camera isn't tampered with, it requires some type of aiming procedure to make sure that camera is seeing what it needs to see and understands the distances between it and the vehicle in front of it. We'll also let them know which systems are affected by that camera or sensor, whether or not a diagnostic trouble code will set if it's done improperly, whether or not we need a scan tool, and whether or not special tools are required together, whether that be aiming targets, whether that be just a level, for example, for like Ford on their adaptive cruise control, you need a level to make sure that it's level. So whether or not special tools are required, others may just simply require a dynamic test drive with the scan tool hooked up to it to just kind of self-learn itself. So those are some of the features that we got on the RTS website. Now this is part of the subscription base that are available to, again, those that are like our Gold Class professionals. And I don't know if we have a number of how many California shops are Gold Class at our fingertips, but we go to 120,000 individuals across the country that do have access to this website. And then we're also working on a number of collision repair diagnostic courses that are available to the inter-industry on scan tools, some common procedures for calibration and aiming up front facing cameras, one specific to Nissan safety shield technology, and we're also working on some new courses as well that are going on right now, including a glass replacement course on how to, the considerations for replacing glass on a vehicle that's equipped with a camera in it, and some of those considerations, make sure that you've got the proper glass. There are some concerns about aftermarket glass as well on there. So again, trying to share those considerations with the industry so that we're repairing these vehicles and putting them back on the road so that those systems are functioning properly, and all in support of the ICAR vision of complete, safe, and quality repairs for the ultimate benefit of the consumer. And that's all I have.
Very good. Jason, thank you very much. This was a very popular issue that folks had been asking us to get on the agenda, and we're just trying to align your schedule, trying to find the right meeting to do so. So thank you very much. Let's get some questions, comments. Nikki had her hand up first. Nikki Ayers.
Sorry. I was just wondering if there's a way to maybe start to incorporate some of that into the brake and lamp inspection process. Have you thought of that?
Hasn't been anything with respect to that. And I think given the fact that we are in the process of reviewing that, our handbooks and our certification process and requirements and the inspection, overall inspection for both the brake and lamp programs, that would be a comment we would certainly want to take up at this time. Yes.
Definitely lacking a lot.
Okay. We'll definitely have to see what our authority is with respect to those two programs, but that's something we should take into consideration. And those regulations, I think you saw from Sergi's presentation, are still under development, so we'll take a look at that.
Potentially.
Thank you. Jack.
Jason, great presentation. A lot of good information. It's getting much more difficult to repair cars these days. I want to follow up just so I have an understanding, because you went through it, pre and post scanning.
Yes.
So you mentioned that some manufacturers, or maybe manufacturers, have a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
They require that a shop have to pre and post scan. Is that correct?
Yes, they have position statements, published position statements that suggest that dictate scanning every vehicle with no relation to the years or anything like that as well.
So there's a requirement. Now, on some manufacturers may be silent on this. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is accurate.
Okay.
Yes.
What happens in those situations where the shop has a vehicle in there, but there isn't an OE?
Sure.
Or at least position statement. So would they look to ICAR, or how do they go about making sure that they do this properly in terms of liability, making sure they repair the car correctly?
From a purely technical standpoint, if you don't scan the vehicle, it's not possible to identify the systems that may be affected. Similar to three-dimensional measuring. We use three-dimensional measuring for everything in the collision repair industry to make sure the vehicle structure is aligned properly, make sure that it affects steering suspension angles and drivability. Again, we can't measure a couple of millimeters with our eyes. So three-dimensional measuring has become a standard for everything. So when we're doing our damage analysis process, we're making measurements to identify how far that damage has traveled. I liken it the same thing to the scanning. If we don't hook the scan tool up, there's no possible way for us to identify what codes are present. There's no way for us to have a conversation with all parties involved, including the consumer, that, this particular code is likely related to the collision. This one is likely not related to the collision. So from a purely technical standpoint, if you don't do it, you don't know what you're dealing with, and it's not possible to write a complete and accurate assessment of that vehicle.
You mentioned that some best practices, and you've got a group of folks, shops,
Yep.
Educators, insurers that have gotten together and have developed, or at least, best practices standards. If there's a gap, is that between the manufacturers?
Correct, yeah, for best practices for how to approach the vehicle, how to go through the scanning process, making sure that you've got agreement from the consumer. Privacy has been an issue that has come up from time to time of sharing information between a collision repairer and an insurer without the consumer's knowledge. So that has been an issue in a couple of situations. So again, how to go through that entire process. ICAR is not in a position to say everything must be scanned or shouldn't be scanned or put a make, model, year on it. Again, we're focusing purely on the technical, from a technical standpoint of if you don't do it, you simply do not know the extent to which we're repairing. It could potentially adversely affect cycle time, getting that consumer's key back to them on time. It could potentially create conflict between the repairer and the consumer if they, that light was never on before, my vehicle never did that before. By having that evidence of key cycles or miles driven, it's just a good business practice as well as, from a safety standpoint for the calibrations.
Let me follow up on the calibration, because that was really interesting. I guess with the cameras, you mentioned cameras within the windshield.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if you're off by 1 millimeter, that could be a potential safety issue? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about just 1 degree at the windshield might not be an issue, but when you're projecting that out several hundred feet, if the camera's aimed too high, it may not see that vehicle in front of it. We had a situation in our market where a camera was aimed too high, and the first time the individual drove down the highway, it saw an overpass, and the vehicle slammed on the brakes, thinking that there was a vehicle in front of it. So again, can create some, even if there's no vehicle in front of it, now you've got a potential issue with a rear-end collision, perhaps.
Yeah, no. Now, do manufacturers have position statements on calibration as well, or how does that work?
There aren't position statements, but what they will do is, again, publish very similar to our calibration. So here, for example, if you look at their camera and rearview mirror, Honda says if the camera unit is removed or replaced, it must be re-aimed. If the windshield is removed or replaced, it must be re-aimed. So they have published right within the procedures for that camera replacement. They will have those, not positions, those are our technical specifications that if this is done, it must be calibrated, and then they will have very specific step-by-step procedures for how to go about that calibration.
I know that the California and BAR, we passed some regulations dealing with windshield replacement, meeting OE standards, and I know the big issue was cure time, and that sort of thing. And now it's like we got cameras within these windshields, and it sounds like it's a significant potential safety issue. In fact, if you have someone replacing a windshield, and they don't, depending on the glass, and they got cameras within the glass, it's gotten so complicated now. You really need to understand this and know what you're doing.
Yes, you do, and we've been working closely with the Auto Glass Safety Council, and are trying to get the word out through them to glass installers across the country about these calibration requirements. I do know that several aftermarket glass installers are starting to carry scan tools and aiming targets and equipment around with them, but we've got a long ways to go to educate the glass industry as well.
Yeah, so I'm just curious in terms of the aiming on the windshield, is that something that can be done, it has to be done in a closed setting, or can that be done like out in the street somewhere?
There are great variations of what needs to be done. So for example, Ford's is a dynamic one that requires you to drive for a minimum of 10 minutes at 40 miles, minimum of 40 miles per hour. Honda, on the other hand, you can do that one in an environment. It needs to be a level area. It needs to be clear of shadows. You need X feet of space in the front, side, and rear of the vehicle. So there are significant variations from vehicle maker to vehicle maker, and model to model.
Yeah, I know there are mobile repair facilities out there that they're repairing, maybe come to your home.
Yep.
And I didn't, those kind of circumstances, do you have to, like you said, it depends, but repairing correctly, making sure the calibration, if it has a camera, can that be done safely, or does it, or is that a concern?
They're going to need to have the tools and equipment and the space, and again, whatever those parameters are within that vehicle maker procedure, they're going to need to adhere to that to make sure it's done properly.
Are you thinking about a career change? Are you thinking about a career change? Oh.
No, I'm just asking. Thank you very much, Jason.
He's got a crack in his glass, he's wondering.
Yeah, George.
George Ritz, California Automotive Teachers. My understanding is that something as simple as doing a wheel alignment
Yes,
can necessitate really calibrating that.
that is correct. Yeah, I believe Audi is one vehicle manufacturer. If you do a wheel alignment, then a number of the systems do require calibration.
And can you talk about the cost of the calibration equipment?
It varies greatly. The aftermarket scan tools are becoming more familiar with the collision repair industry. Again, through Equipment and Tool Institute, ETI, we've been working quite closely with them to try to educate them on the collision repair needs. They've historically focused on, drivability, emissions, OBD2, et cetera. They are now starting to build aftermarket alignment equipment. I know Bosch has some out there. So, depending on how far you want to go, it could be, a couple thousand to, tens of thousands of dollars if you invest in a number of different scan tools and targets and OE scan tools and aftermarket scan tools. It's a huge gap there. And I think there's a huge education piece as well. I know the advisory groups that I sit on, I'm trying to educate them to incorporate it into their curriculum. Because this is a brand new opportunity for young technicians to get into, and I think make a good living for themselves doing this type of work at an independent or a multi-shop organization, body shop.
But you can see how the cost of something like that for the schools
Absolutely.
might make it prohibitive.
Absolutely, and that's, we work very closely with the ICAR, the Collision Repair Education Foundation. They've got several grants. They're giving away millions and millions of dollars of tool and equipment grants every year that are available to schools through their grant program. So that's one area that, again, a lot of schools have embraced. Others are a little bit, aren't picking up on that as quickly. But certainly the Collision Repair Education Foundation is an avenue to help the schools get the curriculum, get the tools, equipment, et cetera.
Rosemary, I didn't see you come in. I'm sorry. Rosemary Shahan with the Consumers for Automotive Reliability and Safety.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Jason, for the presentation. And we've been weighing in at the federal and state level regarding autonomous vehicles and their adoption. And, as a safety group, we're in favor of improving safety, but we have a lot of concerns about, the technology getting out there before there's enough infrastructure. And, of course, repairs are a major concern.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged to hear you saying that there's more money available for the colleges and everything, but compared to what they're spending on developing, to me, it seems like it's not nearly enough. So I'm wondering if you have a sense of what portion of the auto repair industry is really prepared for this technology.
2 years ago, I would have said, a very, very small percentage. But I think we're getting better. I think the awareness has been a huge portion. So whether they may not do it in-house yet, but they're working with a local dealership in many cases, or there are now starting to become a lot of mobile organizations that will come to your facility and work with their equipment. They've got, numerous scan tools. They'll come to your facility and do the alignments and calibrations in your facility. There's some other tools out there that you connect to the internet, and essentially it's an interface that deals remotely with an OEM diagnostician in Dallas or Jacksonville, Florida, and that's how they scan vehicles. So the information is getting out there. A lot are starting to embrace it. There's still a lot of confusion in the market, but it's getting better and better. And we're in a significantly different place today than we were just 12 months ago with regard to the awareness part of it.
Is it like 10%?
You know what? I'd hate to give you a guess because I do not know. I would say, you're probably not too far off from there. Again, if we're talking in-shop, in-house, versus the awareness. Again, I think a lot of vehicles are being repaired properly. It's just that they might not be doing it under their own roof.
Jonathan.
I'm curious with the, particularly with the advanced driver's assistance systems, and as we're seeing more and more autonomous technology being launched, and it has been that case for the last several years. What are you seeing in the development of the aftermarket parts industry? Something that makes me a bit nervous.
I don't think we're seeing a lot of the cameras and sensors being developed in the aftermarket at this point. And I think, again, with glass, for example, the glass for the aftermarket glass is right now significantly more than the OE glass. I just looked at that Ford F-150 windshield the other day, and the aftermarket glass was twice the price of the OE just because of the volume of it. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of aftermarket cameras and sensors anytime soon. I know I haven't seen it, but it's been pretty much all OE stuff to this point.
Okay, and the sensors that are, say, hidden behind a bumper cover, things along those lines, are you seeing, where there are aftermarket bumper covers and the like that might be available? Are you seeing potential interference or conflicts in this?
I have not looked into the bumpers and the sensor issues, but there are certainly, if it's a different thickness, there might be some issues there. And a lot of the vehicle manufacturers will have positions on film thickness, so they won't allow you to paint or repair damage in that area. They require a new bumper and then a new sensor, and then painting at one time so that film thickness doesn't adversely affect the sensor's capabilities.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, please turn on the mics when speaking. The webcast, we've gotten a couple of comments that it's difficult to hear folks. So I don't know, is yours working? It seems soft. Okay, maybe just pull it closer to you.
I'm soft-spoken.
A soft-spoken. Speak loudly.
I've always been shy.
Speak loudly. Good. Okay, any other comments?
Pat.
Everybody on the dais done? No? John Gallo?
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. I think it's important the comment you made, Jason, on mobile services, especially in view of the fact that we're currently working on a mobile regulation, ARD, for providing mobile services. So I think it'd be interesting to kind of follow that through to figure out how many are currently in California trying to do that type of service, because the current mobile regulation that we're working on would definitely impact what they do.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, from the public, let's go. I saw a hand here. Yes. I'll have to share the mic here with Jason.
Thanks. First, thanks for the presentation. My name is Jim Porcari.
Move that mic over. Yes.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
I think I can. The webcast is the most concerning, so bring it as close as you can there.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Jim Porcari. I work with a company called Insurance Resources, and we consult for the insurance industry, the collision repair industry, the technology industry. So I've got clients that touch this topic in a number of different ways. Insurance companies are looking for guidance on this. The collision repair shops are trying to figure out what to do. The technology providers. So first, Chairman DeRay and panel, thank you for making this a topic. This is the only Department of Insurance unit that is actively talking about this in a public forum that I'm aware of today, so thank you for that. Secondly, I want to reinforce what Jason has said. Today when you buy a car, you're basically buying a server on four wheels. And when you're in a collision, without scanning that vehicle, when it's done, it may look great, but without understanding the electronic health of that vehicle, you have no idea what you're getting back from that collision repair facility. So this is a topic of great interest, to everybody, not only the consumers, but collision repairers and insurers. And I'm here to ask that the bar continue to really push this topic and provide guidance to all my constituents, because I don't know what to tell them, frankly. I don't know what to tell collision repair chains. I don't know what to tell insurers, other than, there's a lot of dust in the air. Try to figure out what to do. So to the extent that you can push the ball forward and, be the progressive leader in this and give, guidance to other,
insurance companies or departments of insurance, I'd really ask for your help on that. So thank you for the opportunity to
Thank you
comment.
very much for coming today, Jim. I know we've had a few email exchanges, and we're very much looking forward to having you attend all the way from Georgia, as you said. So thank you very much for your appearance here today. Yeah, there are a couple of opportunities, maybe looking down the road, for us to do something in this area. Our newsletter that goes out twice a year. Our next one will be at the beginning of the new year. We just issued the summer newsletter. There are already regulations with respect to collision repair, industry standards for collision repair. I'm not sure if there's a need to update those standards given this this issue, but that's something to look at. So we'll take a look at that. I want to take a second to introduce someone from who's kind of our expert in auto body, Mark Guess. If you could stand up with our technical training unit. He's been going around the state doing presentations with our own staff, and when I walked in the room, it was really good to see Mark and Jason having a really technical discussion. I quickly wanted to change it to the upcoming football season, but and get it into a Packers-Niners discussion with you guys. But no, it's very good to see you guys touching base with each other. Thank you. Other comments? But I know you had a hand too. But Gene Lopez, formerly with ICAR.
Formerly with ICAR, yeah. Hi, good morning. I am Gene Lopez, and I am with Seidner's Collision Center. We have 14 locations in Southern California. So, along with what Jason has brought to us, and again, thank you, Jason, and as the rest have expressed, you've done a real great job. We're concerned right now, Seidner's Collision Center is concerned with a couple of items. One is how an insurer relates this to discovery. And we've heard terms around, we don't pay for discovery, we pay for the repair to the vehicle. So there's a concern for us as repairers. We have to perform the pre-scan, we have to perform the post-scan, and in some cases, it's a second and third post-scan, and maybe even fourth post-scan, because the modules, Jason related to Ford having to drive a vehicle for 10 miles at 40 miles per hour in Southern California on the 210 freeway.
Just kind of Wisconsin.
Yeah. So there's issues like that. There's issues around history, and there's issues around permanent codes, and how we bring those back to the consumer, or how we even bring them up to the consumer. They brought their car in with no indication that their front camera was out of alignment, or their front camera wasn't working, and they only have 1,500 miles on their vehicle, and they were hitting the rear. That's why they brought it to us. So, Chief DeRay, we need to let your program representatives, we need to help them understand what the repairs are up against when it comes to consumer affairs. And in George Hertz, in as much as having a scan tool at the CT, Career and Technical Education sites, I think there will be a lot of static learning as compared to dynamic learning, having that scan tool. It would be great for us to have electrical mechanical technicians come in with just the knowledge of what some of these codes really mean. And you can get that without having to have that scan tool in front of you. So be prepared for that, and let your educators know that there may be some static learning available so that they can be prepared to understand what these scan tools, the information that the scan tools are giving them. Giancarlo, mobile services, these are sublet vendors for us as compared to a mobile guy going into a parking lot and performing repairs to a vehicle. So we rely on them a lot, and as a matter of fact, I've had the opportunity, because our mobile services have OE tools, and we have an aftermarket tool, it's called Autel. We have Autel Max Assist tools that we're performing the pre-scan and post-scans on. And so what we've done is we've done some comparison. Bring your Honda tool to us, and we're going to scan using the Honda tool, and we're going to scan using our tool. And we've had some pretty good results. There have been some cases where our tool didn't pick up some significant diagnostic trouble codes, and so we're concerned about that, and we made notes about that, and we may need to take it to the local dealer with that particular model of vehicle. So that's where we're concerned, or that's why we don't have as great a concern with the mobile services vendors, because they're a great resource. And we need to have them in a lot of different cases. So getting back to your program representatives and having them become familiar with the ADAS and pre-scanning, post-scanning, and how that relates to the consumer is very, very important, and we appreciate your time on that.
Well, thank you, Gene. And I suspect that Mark will be doing some of that with incorporating some of that into maybe his training with our program reps.
Actually, I already answered.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Already all over that. Windshields and ADAS.
Thank you, Mark. I want to point Mark out so that Gene and Jason and others, just know our auto body expert in our training unit. I have a familiar face there. All right, other questions? Bud, you're good? Okay. Going back to Jack.
Yeah, I just want to follow because I heard a couple of the comments about clarification and sort of some help with the Bureau. I like your idea about maybe in the newsletter, having maybe an article or something on this issue. Just sort of clarification, because I know the 3365 was mentioned in there, and I know, Gene, you mentioned something about we don't pay for this, and I've heard pretty clearly here today things are required, and there's position statements. You have to do them, and I believe under the current law that the insurers have to pay for good and workmanlike manner, and I think that ties in. So I think an article would be a good way, and plus the education we mentioned with Mark would be a good idea to follow up with this presentation.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
Tracy Renee, Automotive Service Councils of California. I guess I'm confused. So when you're doing the scanning, you're saying the insurance companies are not paying for pre and post scan or discovery or any of that? They're not paying for that work?
It varies. And iCar does not deal with times or prices or who pays for what, but I can tell you that there are positions from corporate in many cases about whether to reimburse or not to reimburse. And then it does get down in the field and one-offs there. But there's been reports of things being all over the board with regard to the amount of time or a per scan charge. But again, there's been significant change in the last 12 months with regard to that, and we're starting to see a lot more alignment around that.
Well, this doesn't just have a risk for the shops that are involved in repairing these vehicles, but the consumers aren't aware of this, I'm sure,
right,
of their policies. So I think that there needs to be some consumer protection for the consumers so that they know, if I get in a wreck in my car, I want it fixed.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I pay for insurance, I expect it to be fixed properly.
Yep. Yep. And that's where, And yeah, that's why we developed that best practice around the approach to that. Now, again, we can't enforce that, but certainly from a technical best practice for complete safe quality repairs for the ultimate benefit of the consumer, it needs to be done.
All right, I think it's all part of the process, so it should be covered. But anyway, thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you for coming all the way out here.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Very important issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. All right, moving along, we have, back by popular demand, been requested to give an update on the implementation of AB 2153 Garcia, the Lead Acid Battery Recycling Act of 2016. We have with us today, is Is it Sandy? Sandy
Yes.
Barrow and Lisa Sherrod? Is Lisa here? No?
Yes, I'll be doing the presentation, though.
And you're no longer the Board of Equalization, which we did not know when we went to print. You are now the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. What's the acronym for that one?
CDTFA?
I can't make a word out of that.
It rolls off the tongue.
It's, yeah, please explain. It's separate from the Board of Equalization now, or?
Yes, it's a
Oh.
separate department from the Board of Equalization.
Oh, okay. So along with that, this program went with you to that new department. Okay.
Yes. Well, thank you. That was part of my introduction, to introduce myself as Sandy Barrow with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. And I want to thank the advisory group for inviting us back, because we did provide a presentation back in January. And we have fully implemented this program, and my staff had come back and come in January. And so I'm doing the presentation this time. But everything's implemented for this program that began in April. And I just want to go through a lot of the stuff that we provided back in January is still the same. We do have some things that were brought online that weren't available at the time, so I'll cover that also. So it is an update, but some of the information is the same, so you'll see me breeze over it a little bit more since it was previously presented. But the lead-acid battery program began as a result of Assembly Bill 2153, which, if I remember to click the button. There we go. And it created two separate fees for the sale and purchase of lead-acid batteries. One was for the California battery fee, which is imposed upon dealers, which are also known as retailers, and the manufacturer battery fee, which is imposed upon manufacturers and importers. It did begin in April 1st, 2017. The first return is going to be due July 31st, 2017. And the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration and the Department of Toxic Substances Control are really responsible for administration of these two fees. So we go through and really talk about what is a lead-acid battery, because that is a common question that we get. And it is primarily composed of both the lead and sulfuric acid. It has to weigh over 5 kilograms, which is about 11 pounds, and be 6 or more volts. It's used to start an internal combustion engine, a motive power battery to provide for propulsion of a vehicle or watercraft, stationary storage or standby energy to be used in a system for emergency backup or electrical storage, or a source of auxiliary power to support electrical systems in a vehicle or an aircraft. We do want to make sure we're defining what a replacement lead-acid battery is, and it is a new lead-acid battery that replaces the original equipment or vehicle battery. A replacement lead-acid battery is not a spent, discarded, refurbished, reconditioned, rebuilt, or reused battery. And then we go through and talk about dealers, which are also retailers of lead-acid batteries. And it is every person who engages in the retail sale of a replacement lead-acid battery directly to consumers in California. This does include manufacturers who actually sell directly to consumers in California. Sorry. And then retail sales of lead-acid batteries do not include temporarily stored or used in California for exclusive use outside of California, incorporate into new equipment to be resold, provided by a warranty or vehicle service contract, used in a medical device, or when the California battery fee has already been paid. So the dealers and retailers' requirements that are administered by our department, it's charged for them to charge and collect the $1 California battery fee from consumers who purchase replacement lead-acid batteries. The fee is not subject to sales tax, but the dealers may retain 1.5% of the fee as cost reimbursement for collecting the fee. They are required to separately state the fee on all invoices, except for sales for resale, and they can lump into one line if they make multiple sales of batteries. It's important to note that the $1 California battery fee will increase to $2 on April 1st, 2022. There are requirements that are administered by the DTSC and not our department, and for dealers and retailers to be aware of, and that's to charge a refundable deposit when a consumer buys a replacement lead-acid battery and does not exchange their old one at the same time. The deposit is subject to sales tax if the transaction is taxable, and there are refund provisions that are required too. They have to accept up to 6 used lead-acid batteries of the same type without charging a fee, and required to post specific written notice in the public area or on the receipt. We do have that in our slide, but that is in the statute. And there are businesses that aren't required to post this, and that's businesses that don't normally sell batteries, auto repair shops that install batteries as part of their service, and roadside service. The second part of the fee is for the manufacturer fee, and we want to define who is a manufacturer, and that's a person who manufactures and sells or distributes lead-acid batteries in California, or retailers, any person who imports batteries into California which are purchased from a manufacturer does not have jurisdiction in California. The requirements for a manufacturer is to pay the $1 manufacturer fee for each lead-acid battery sold to a dealer, wholesaler, distributor, or other person in California from April 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2022. Collect the $1 California battery fee if they sell to end consumers in a retail transaction, and the manufacturer battery fee becomes inoperative on April 1st, 2022. So we do have all of our systems in place. We do have our online registration that's available for anyone to register for this program. You can see the link to the new registration on our website. We also have our online filing. That's part of registration. So our online filing is also available. So if you log in, you currently have a sales and use tax account with us, you can log in using your login to file online if you've already registered for the program. And we have a sample now available of what the return looks like for the California battery fee. And it's a very simple return. You enter the number of replacement lead-acid batteries sold in California during the reporting period that's subject to the fee. It will calculate the $1, and then it'll less for the California side, it'll less the 1.5% retailer reimbursement amount, and it'll calculate the fee due. The manufacturer return is just as simple. You enter the amount of lead-acid batteries that are sold in California that are subject to the fee, and it'll calculate the manufacturing battery fee also. I do know we have a specific audience here today, so we do have a recap for repair shops, what the responsibilities are, and that is to collect the California battery fee on all retail sales of new replacement lead-acid batteries. The California battery fee does not apply to batteries when the fee has already been paid, when it's used exclusively outside of California, when it's incorporated into new equipment, replaced without charge under warranty vehicle service contract, used in a medical device, used as a stationary storage or a standby battery for purposes of storage of electrical equipment, a source of emergency backup or other backup power. And dealers may retain 1.5% of the fee as cost reimbursement, charge a refundable taxable deposit, separately list the fee and deposit, and ensure that they increase the fee to $2 come April 1st, 2022. We do have lots of information available on our website. Our tax and fee guide for the lead-acid battery is available. We also just recently updated the repair guide for automotive repair, and it now includes a lead-acid battery program. We do have a 1-800 number available for anyone who has questions. And we also provided DTSC's information, since they do have a role in this fee, and their fee units information. I do have 2 main staff that have implemented this program that have been answering every question that has come across our department's desk, and that is Carol Bailey and Angela DeMille-Leach, and their contact information is also there. So I try to keep it quick and short since it is kind of just an update, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Sandy. I think I'd like to consider, so the staff from our office is paying attention, consider working with you to do a newsletter article for our winter 2018.
Oh, absolutely.
Edition, if we could make the contact with you to do that. I thought it was in this summer edition, but I think we were waiting for the effective date before we actually finalized any writing and communication with our industry on this. So, thank you. John.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. Just a quick comment. One of the biggest complaints we were getting from our members was the difficulty in getting logged into your system. And I don't know if you were aware of it or anybody's being, assigned to address that, but one of the biggest frustrations was getting signed up for the program so that they get started online.
I did hear a little bit about that during my staff's implementation. I know our online services, we have a whole group that administers all of our department's online services, not just a specific program. And this is something that was common that they saw. And I believe that they have worked through giving scripts to our 1-800 number and making sure that people are well aware of how to go in to, if you already have a seller's mint, to go and add a new account for a different program. So that was probably, I think, the stickler and how to register and log in to do it. So it was something that I think we have our 1-800 number staffed with some frequently asked questions, and also my staff is well aware of it too. You're welcome.
Other questions? Tracy?
Tracy May, the Automotive Service Councils of California. Thank you. It's a great presentation. We have some members that file monthly, their sales tax monthly. So will this only be a quarterly filing?
It is only a quarterly filing, yes, at this time. I'm sure that if someone asked, we possibly could consider another reporting method, but the statute did require it quarterly.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan.
So, a number of repair facilities had registered previous to the big switch from BOE to the CDTFA. Do they need to update anything? Is there any changes? Likewise with the tire fees, facilities have registered. It's all seamless. They don't need to do anything special?
That's correct.
Okay.
Our agency change is going to be all seamless. There's nothing that tax or fee payers need to do. We have already put banners on our website cross-links, so everything's there. When you log in, it's still logging in through the same way. When you file, it's still filing the same way. We're still in the process of working the split. There are some areas that stay with BOE, but most everything moves to the new department.
Okay, and then one follow-up question. In the statute itself, you had in your slides mentioned that batteries that are replaced pursuant to a service contract or a warranty without charge are not subject to the fee. However, the statute itself and all of the legislative history, legislative analysis, there's nothing in there that mentions that there's certain, because some service contracts, some warranties might have a deductible or something along those lines, not just for the battery but for the repair of everything. And it looks like you've kind of made that policy decision internally without legislative authority to have limitations on that exemption. Now, I know there's another bill that's moving through the legislature to create some clarification, but I'm just wondering what did you look at for a justification so this wouldn't be seen as, say, an underground regulation?
Well, the statute did say that it's exempt when it's sold under a vehicle service, and our legal department does help us with interpreting the statute, which we actually did work with them on. The one thing to understand with this is this statute actually builds, you have to use definitions. It defines only lead-acid batteries sold in a retail sale. It uses what's defined as a retail sale under 6,012 of the Sales and Use Tax Code. So you actually have to jump around to different codes. But a retail sale is anything sold for, it's a sale. So if there's any type of consideration given, that does constitute a sale. So it does kind of go into the back. If you are charging for that battery, it constitutes a sale. And then the fee that triggers the lead-acid battery fee. So that's how our legal has interpreted what the question that you're asking about, that there is a sale actually happening, and it's not just purely a vehicle service as a result. But the deposit side, I guess that if it's not selling the battery, because a lot of what we've interpreted has been more, and you walk into your Kragen and your repair shop type places, not repair shops, I should say, your Kragen and your retailer type establishments, those are the ones that we were probably tailoring our questions to. When someone walks into a repair shop and says that there's a deposit, or what'd you call it? You called it a,
There's a core charge
Yeah, no, that
but
wasn't it.
I'm
It
talking about
was-
the fee itself.
that there's some type of deductible, I think that's the
Oh,
term you
yeah,
used,
as
I'm
far as
sorry.
the deductible.
It was a deductible. I'm not sure if we've answered that question.
Okay.
So that might be something that we should be exchanging on.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Sandy.
Thank you.
Yep. Good job. Okay, back up. Craig Coburn, Smog Check Performance Reports, our annual reports that are due to an annual publishing. We've posted one of them already on our website. It's due July 1st of each year. And we presented we've been doing this the last few years at the Bar Advisory Group meeting in July to give you an update on that, as well as the second report that hasn't been released yet because it's still being it's in transit, I guess, between us and the Air Resources Board, but it'll ultimately be a statistical, some narrative, but some mostly statistical reporting of the performance of the Smog Check program, and it's due to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So here to give us an update, as alluded to in the legislative presentation, is Craig Coburn.
Thank you, Bar Advisory Group, and thank you, Pat. Pat covered a lot of the presentation, so this is great. I love it when he does this. All right, so first up, Smog Check Performance Report. The majority of this presentation will be on that, just to give you guys some of the details and kind of walk through it. As Pat said, that one has been posted out to BAR's website. That report is required by AB 2289. As you guys remember, a few years ago passed and brought STAR and brought the OBD-only requirement for newer vehicles to be testing, as well as this requirement to report on the changes that had happened. The US EPA report has been around for a long time and is required by the federal government and the Federal Register. That one I don't have many slides on, but I'll give you the basics of it. It is a number of ways to count the inspections. You know, how many of this happened, how many of those had repairs, how many of those did this, that, and the other thing. So those for years have been posted out to our website. To get to it on our website, just remember, go to the far right tab, and then you're going to go to reports, which is the next far right tab, and you'll see them all there. So it's with the executive summary and these two reports. If you guys really want to get something out of that report for yourself, skip to the very end of the report, go to the very bottom. It's a very long report with just table after table after table. So if you go to the very end, there is some narrative by BAR that talks about the changes, the updates, enforcement activities, number of stations licensed, a lot of very helpful information there at the very end. You guys will see that there are some changes to reports kind of throughout the years based on US EPA changes. The OIS coming in, there's OIS data kind of in there for the first full year this year. That's one of the big changes to that. It used to have OBD from the Bar 97 in there. Now it's kind of the OIS broken out by the Bar 97. So if you guys do look at it, keep that in mind. All right, so here is one of the main charts that kind of spurred on AB 2289. Sierra Research did this a number of years ago on contract with BAR and ARB. You guys have heard of the refail rate. So this is kind of the chart that everyone always talks about. So let's see if this has a laser pointer. It kind of does. I don't know where you guys are looking. You guys are probably looking at your presentations. But right above Pat's head up here, you'll see that this says 45%. And this is kind of your key number that you guys have always heard quoted over the years. So this is talking about vehicles fail at a smog station. They then get certified at a smog station. Then they show up at the roadsides and fail. And so this is telling you over time. So on the bottom down here, the number of days after the smog check inspection we saw it at roadsides. So this comes back and you hit it at time zero, meaning at the time of the smog check or right after the smog check what is that failure rate estimated to be out at roadsides? And so that number was that historical, very high number that scared us all of 45%. The bottom line is very similar, but those are vehicles that went into the shop once, and they got passed and certified there at the shop, and then went to the roadsides and failed. And that number's always been slightly lower, at about 17%. So that's back in calendar year 2003 to 2006 data. And I talked about a little bit about what roadsides does. It collects it on these older vehicles. So the historic analysis that was done was 1976 to 1995 model year vehicles. So that's why roadsides focuses on the older vehicles to try to reproduce this. The other important points here as I go through my notes, because there's so much involved in all this. So this is only for ASM tailpipe results. So we focus on ASM tailpipe. This does not include visual, functional, OBD, visible smoke. None of that stuff is included in here. So it's just the very simple test. So the whole idea of this is to show how smog check stations are doing, how these cars are reacting to the program, how effective is the program working. One of the other important notes here is that at the roadsides, we see somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 times the failure rate you see in the normal smog check stations. I think that was one of the questions that Tracy had asked earlier. So obviously that depends on the model year and so forth, Tracy, but that's the in general number. So the next slide is, how does it look 10 years after we did that original report? So here's that same chart from the last 2 years of data out on roadsides. Again, we upped the model years slightly to 1976 to 1999, mainly because our sample size is starting to fall off. It's tough to find a lot of 76s on the road 10 years later. So we have slightly started to bump that up. But it doesn't make much of a difference. So last year we did it up to 95. This year we went up to 99. So you'll see that as compared to last year, which was the 45%, this year's data is showing we're at about 24% at time equals 0. So what happens right after the car has failed, then been certified at a station, then showed up at the roadside and failed again? What percent is that? So we're down to about a quarter of the cars hitting that number. And the cars that initially pass at the station and then show up at roadside and fails about 12%. And you can see that there's a big slope change here, meaning how fast does that line go up? That's indicating that there's a faster deterioration rate going on with the vehicles for whatever reason that is. There's a lot more detail in the report if you guys are interested in this stuff. And the other key point to take away from this is that there's fewer high-emitting vehicles found on the road. So a lot of the improvements that have happened over time, it's, between the STAR improvements, we saw a big jump. That's when the reporting really made a big difference. We saw these rates begin to come down. As Barr said, station performance becomes an important thing. We see that the refill rates go down. And the next couple slides will kind of help with that here. So this complicated slide is looking at how does a low-performing station versus a high-performing station compare? What does that refailure rate look like when you look at the different station types? So low-performing stations, and again, this is using the STAR FPR scores you guys may or may not be aware of. It has two scenarios, which makes it fairly confusing, but basically they're different FPR breakouts. Scenario one uses a 0.9 and for the high end and a 0.1 for the low end. And for scenario two, it's a tighter criteria where it uses a 0.975 compared to a 0.025 scenario. So again, just showing that no matter how you break that, you're going to come up with similar results. Low-performing stations have a much higher refailure rate than it does at the very high-performing stations. And you can kind of see where the average is there within the industry. I think that about covers that one. All right, so this one kind of plays on to the last one. So again, across the axis on the bottom, you see we've got FPR scores, and this gives it more of a range basically from 0 to 1 or from 0 to 100%. Low-performing stations being on your left and high-performing stations being on your right. So what this is showing is where it says probability, that's the roadside predicted failure rate. So basically what this is showing is that when you look at low-performing stations, you're going to find that this red kind of grouping, or the red line here, that approximately 57% of the vehicles at the lowest performing stations are predicted to fail at a roadside event. Then when you look at it at the red line at the far right side, at the highest performing station, so the FPR of 1, the highest you can get, you have a predicted failure rate of 18%. So again, showing that there's a big discrepancy. Where's the problem in smog check? Well, we know that it can perform at the 18% because we see the high performing stations doing that. But we see that we have a problem on the low performing stations where it's more than 3 times the refail probability. All right, enough with those charts. So in summary, here's basically what the report found, and you guys will find these in the report as well. Smog check program has improved significantly as a result of AB 2289 and the STAR program, especially among higher performing stations. Roadside tailpipe failure rates are much lower than 10 years ago, 16 versus 24%. STAR stations continue to outperform non-STAR stations. Lowest performing stations continue to deteriorate. Emissions reductions benefits lost due to station performance is estimated to be 34 tons per day. And as we presented a little earlier, there are some new STAR regulations. So those forthcoming regulatory changes are intended to keep low-performing stations out of the STAR program and improve the overall program. More work is still needed to better understand the durability of the repairs. And that's all I have today. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Greg. Questions or comments from the advisory group? Jonathan, pull the mic as close as you can there on that one.
Great presentation, Greg. I'm a data geek, you know that, and I love this. I'm just curious, and I know you said there's more data, more study that needs to be done as to, why is it that high performing stations repairs are much more durable than low performing stations? But anecdotally, I mean, what are some of the things that you're seeing, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. So really, all of what 2289 focused on really wasn't repairs. It was all inspection-based criteria. So, I mean, everything that STAR looks at is all inspection-based. So it really doesn't focus on repairs. That's what we're saying. We haven't really studied that area. We really have focused on what happens when the car passes and fails at smog check. What does that look like? And we're saying that doesn't look good when it's a low-performance station. So what repairs are causing those, or repairs that maybe aren't happening, inspections that maybe the car shouldn't have passed when it was there at the station? Those are the types of things that we think are probably causing a lot of this. Does that answer?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether you've had a little somebody say, oh yeah, I was at a low performing station. This is the way we used to do things versus now we do it the right way. I'm curious.
Right. No, that's a good question. I don't know if we want to give some of those anecdotal stories of conversations we've had with stations. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Tracy?
Tracy Ringley, Automotive Service Councils of California. Are all of these just tailpipe only, or do you have visual in here as well? I mean, what?
Great question, Tracy. So it's all tailpipe throughout the entire thing. And the main reason for that is when we do roadside testing, we do not want to open hoods. We don't want to hurt consumers' cars while they're driving around the road trying to get to work and everything else. So we try to do it as simple and get them in and out of there as fast as we can. So basically we grab OBD and tailpipe results, OBD when it's available, and tailpipe always on the vehicles as they pass through the lanes.
Others? Yes, Rosemary.
Rosemary Shaham, Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety. Thanks, Greg. This is fascinating stuff. And I have the same question Jonathan had. and I wonder, is there a way for consumers to know which shops are the low performers and which one are the stars? And also, is there a way to get the low-performing shops to provide examples of what they're putting in the car? I mean, I just wonder, are they putting in crappy parts? Is that what's going on?
Good question. So a lot of it, quite honestly, is, shops, we're looking for, did they certify the car at the end? So once it's certified and it's done, the question is, was the car actually in a passing condition? So when we're taking it down to the timeframes where we're looking what happened literally right at the time. So what are the chances that a part got put in and an hour later the car's in a failing condition? Even if you're putting a cat in and you're upstream, you should have replaced the spark plugs or something. It didn't burn a cat out in an hour, most likely. And Bud or somebody else can correct me if I'm incorrect on that. So more than likely, many of these are inspections that were not properly done. As far as consumers, that was also a great question. We would encourage consumers to go to Star Stations. It's on BAR's website, so you can do the station locator as well as call BAR's 1-800 number, and there's a phone tree to find a Star Station near them. As BAR continues to tighten up that criteria, we'll be making those stations obviously better and better. So that's kind of our goal, is to get consumers into those Star certified stations.
But all the star scores are up there for both star and non-star stations, right?
As well, yes, they can actually go in and look at the same thing the stations can, so they can look at actually the star score of the station and see how high it is. If they would like to, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to know the station ID and some things, but they could definitely do that.
Thank you. I'd love to work with BAR and maybe with Enviro groups and other consumer groups and promote the Star stations.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you. Tracy?
Thank you. There's a lot of great stations that aren't Star stations because they do not want to participate in having a BAR 97 and OIS. So that's kind of a, not really fair in a sense. I mean, we have a Star test and repair station, but I know a lot of great techs that do great smogs, and they don't want to participate in the Star because of the equipment requirement.
Yeah, and
So
that's a great reason to look at the
And I think
FPR
the
scores.
I think the scores are there, whether you're Star or not, and that would be more of the direction to lead consumers versus just to be fair.
Okay, good comment. Others? Bud?
Hi, Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. This is actually a little more confusing than you think. And part of it is, what's the purpose of smog check? And if the regulator said it's because we want to lower emissions from mobile sources, okay, great. If you ask Rosemary's members, they might say, I want to pass the test. That's what they say. So here comes the car into a shop. The consumer or my customer wants to pass the test. So if I'm looking at their car, and I'll make up a story here, but if I'm looking at their car and 3 of the spark plug wires are a little bit weird, and that's what's causing high HC, but they really ought to get all 8, it takes 3 to pass, 8 to be better. What am I supposed to do? Okay, so if I say, let's replace the whole set of spark plug wires, industry would say that's the correct approach. But did I oversell them the 5? Because they really needed 3. So if I sell them the 3, they're going to fail 300 days from now on roadside. If I sell them the 8, they may pass 300 days at roadside. So there's a little bit of stuff going on here that makes it so that I think we have to concentrate not just on the inspection component of it, but whether or not good repairs are being done too, and their customers getting the best bang for the buck. And Rosemary, I'll tell you this, if you were to say, who are the best performing stores versus the other stores, there may be an incentive for people to go to the lower performing stations, to be quite honest with you, because I'll bet there's a correlation between money spent on the higher performing ones than on the lower performing ones. So people that are caught in an economic grind may be able to only spend a little bit of money and not go more, which would have been better for the car and better for roadside, but you can't get there. So it's a little more complicated than you think, but I think as a group, we have to concentrate on not only good inspections and testing, but also in whether or not cars are getting repaired effectively as well. Thank you.
Excellent comments, Bud, as usual. Thank you very much. We did have a comment on the webcast that I want to share with everyone. And Greg, I'll direct it to you. Are high-performing stations mostly test-only licensed stations or test and repair stations? Best regards, Christina Portillo. I don't know if in the report, did we break it down between test-only, the type of license, test-only versus test and repair?
I think I'm gonna have to phone a friend on this one.
Okay.
Frank DeGenova's in the audience. Frank, do you know, you wanna come up? Frank did a lot of the work on the report, so he may know.
I don't know if we broke it down between test-only and test and repair in the report.
Well, that's a long walk just to say, I don't know. The report does present information about test-only versus test and repair, but not an answer to that specific question.
Okay, thank you. I didn't recall it either, so that would have triggered something, but okay.
Frank often knows these side facts, even if we haven't looked at it. So we'll find out. We'll have to present next meeting what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Sorry. Your boss has a question, I guess. I don't know.
He's
Garrett?
probably got a comment.
A comment. Come on up. Garrett Torgerson, who leads the engineering branch.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Bud's concerns to Mary about, I mean, typically we've not made these scores really accessible to consumers because if you really look at it, just as Bud said, consumers, they love clean air, they love their money more, and a program like this exists to get people to do things they aren't naturally doing on their own, which is repairing their vehicles. Especially for newer vehicles, they have check engine lights that tell them when they come on, tell them that this vehicle needs to be serviced, and yet we know from looking at roadside data that in many cases, even people with newer vehicles, when the check engine lights come on, they're not getting them fixed until they have to have a smog check inspection. I think Tracy alluded to this as well. So I think it's really, we want people to go to the best stations, but I don't know that we really necessarily want to publicize which stations are because there's a lot of mixed interests out there. So.
Thanks, Garrett. Others? Charlie?
Yes, Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. I had a great pleasure once upon a time in Washington, D.C. in 1992 to attend a funding meeting there on enhanced IM. And before we left and come back to California, it was a week-long hearing. And before we left and came back to California, I had the pleasure of meeting with the number 2 person at Fed EPA, not the appointee of the president, but the number 1 bureaucrat. And that was an interesting conversation. But I was asked, as I documented in the letter to the governor as well as to the president, I was asked about the IM240 program and what I thought about that. I said, well, gee whiz, I'd rather start by talking about your federal test procedure. And I said the federal test procedure is quite expensive and quite extensive and takes all day or longer. And it's a bag test, requires very sophisticated equipment. And so let's take a look at that for a moment. And I said, here's what's going to happen. Your car, if it fails for nitrogen oxides by 25%, in a fully developed program, you're going to go down the street to my competitor, and he's going to give you an estimate of $300 to fix your car that has high nitrogen oxides. You're going to come up to my place, and you're going to go, hey, Charlie, I failed this federal test procedure. Do you have any ideas as to how I might approach that? And I said, sure, I can take care of that. I can fix your car. I guarantee it'll pass. The cost is $50. Give me an hour, and I'll have it done for you. Now, what I do is I put in a gallon of ethanol retarded timing 3 degrees. I know it'll pass. Did I fix that car? Hell no. And I will be at the top of the list of highest performing stations for the least cost with the best customer relations. What happens is you, on your way home to your wife for dinner that evening, will hear on the radio how a notice from the Bureau of Automotive Repair. If you think you've ever been cheated by the automotive service industry, let us know, because we want to get rid of all these crooks out here. The guy that will get the notice as being the bad guy will be the guy that gave the estimate for $300. And then he didn't have any answers to what it was really going to cost. And we'll go find out that he used the wrong color toilet paper, or he missed one digit in the VIN number. He will be out of business. I'm going to be promoted as the best guy in the marketplace. So when we don't find out if the cars get fixed, we're never going to fix anything here. And these meetings come to a halt until we decide that we're going to actually do something to see to it that somebody actually fixes a car, which does not seem to be in any way, shape, or form a part of this discussion. And I think that's wrong, and it needs to have some support to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. I was in my 20s when that story was,
Tell me how it's changed, Patrick.
I know. Thank you. All right. Other questions? All right. Thank you both. Cal Vista update. Clay Leak, our deputy chief.
A lot of interesting topics today, and I will follow it with one that's probably not quite as interesting. Try to be as brief as I can, but as Pat mentioned, my name's Clay Leak. I'm Deputy Chief at the Bureau, here to provide you guys a quick status on the Cal Vista project. Just to remind everybody, a quick reminder of kind of the scope of the project and what we're doing. First and foremost, our goal was to negotiate the ownership of the California Vehicle Inspection System, which supports basically all that is smog check. That step of the process is complete. Secondly, to refresh the system to a state-owned data center, which is in process, and I'll provide a little bit of a status of exactly what's going on with that refresh. And lastly, to publish an RFP to obtain ongoing maintenance and operation services and long-term support of the CalViz. And I'll give you guys a brief update on the status of that as well. Just a quick reminder, in terms of our baseline completion dates, these align with our feasibility study report that was published some time ago, which kind of represents the baseline of the project. June, July of 2016 was project planning, completion of the analysis and planning. The next major milestone was the development of the RFP, which has been completed. The release of the RFP, which has also been completed. The next major milestone is actually us receiving draft proposals from our bidders, and then subsequently completing the transition, selecting a vendor, and transitioning to a new contract. So a quick status on the development of the RFP. The RFP was released on 6/2. We conducted a bidders conference in this very room, actually, on the 30th of June. It was very well attended. There's several artifacts available on our website, including who attended, and a few other artifacts from that meeting. The other item I will briefly provide an update on is the bidders library. For bidders that register as an interested party, they will get access to the bidders library. There are 72 documents, I believe, associated with that library, a couple thousand pages of documentation that represents the as-is system, how it works, pretty much all the information a bidder would need to provide an educated response. The status of the move to the OTEC data center is in progress as we speak. Almost, I will say all of the hardware and software has been procured, and the vast majority of it has been delivered. We will begin racking and stacking hardware and configuring hardware before the next BAG meeting, so I'll have a little bit more information in terms of some of the technical activities that are in flight. On the project management side, the vast majority of the plans have been completed and approved. There are several plans, 3 or 4 plans still in process. But, I would say the core management plans are in place and being actively followed. So one of the dependencies I've reported on from day one is, the movement of Bar 97 equipment from dial-up to internet. For several reasons, this is a project dependency. One of the dependencies Pat briefly mentioned earlier was getting that Bar 97 regulation package through. So that is something we are tracking as a risk. The lack of movement with that particular package has definitely caused us some concern recently, so we're working diligently to make sure that package moves through the process as quickly as possible. That package is critical because it gives us the authority to require an internet connection as opposed to a dial-up connection. And obviously, we need to give smog check stations and we need to give Bar 97 equipment manufacturers enough time to get that equipment out into the field and tested properly and deployed. So we're working hard to make sure we are ready with all that stuff that has to occur prior to this transition. Briefly, a lot of resources have been brought on board. A lot of you have, David Waters the SGS program manager has presented with me here. They've made a few changes, so they do have a new program. SGS does have a new program manager who will probably be attending the next BAG meeting and helping present. I thought I'd give him a pass, being that he's a little bit new. Didn't want to rake him over the coals quite this soon. Hardware, software procurement I briefly mentioned already. The vast majority of the hardware and software has been delivered, which is a big milestone. And we're beginning the process of installing a lot of that hardware and software, network connectivity, et cetera. I pretty much touched on this already. I apologize. I'm probably not following the order of my slides quite properly. But the dial-up connectivity is still an issue. We do have continue to have quality of service issues and working with stations to help get that resolved with AT&T and other service providers. I mentioned the regulations are under review and we're working to expedite those as quickly as possible. That said, we do have a test environment and a production environment established, and we've been working with several Bar 97 manufacturers to make sure from the technical perspective that those solutions are tested, and that's going pretty well. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you very much, Clay. Any questions or comments for Clay? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next quarter.
Yep. Well, some of the, Tracy was saying he got lucky, but some of it just moves. It's a big project, and it's tough to, a lot of moving parts, but some of the items will take a while to get to something that we can report that will, where you'll see that change. Okay, let's move along. Repair assistance regulation presentation. We have some ideas designed to look at based on some studies that have been done on repair assistance participation. We've seen some drops in that and some ideas that we're considering to look at increasing participation in the repair assistance program. Welcome both Denise and Randy.
Thank you.
From the Consumer Assistance Program at BAR.
Good morning. Good morning. Before we begin, wanted to make sure that most of you are familiar with the Repair Assistance Program. The Repair Assistance Program provides up to $500 in emission-related repairs to those vehicles, low-income consumers whose vehicles have failed the smog check. Many of the folks who require our assistance need their vehicle to go to work, but they can't afford the smog repairs to actually get their vehicle registered. So we're going to be presenting the updates. The updates are necessary to regulation, are necessary in order to increase participation in the program. And if you can take a look at this chart, you'll notice that between fiscal year 2011-12 and fiscal year 2015-16, the participation in the program decreased dramatically. And we went from 39,000 applications down to 24,000 applications in those 5 years. And that's a 38% decrease. The applications that we actually approved went down even more. It was a 56% decrease. The vehicles repaired, we went from repairing 23,000 vehicles a year back in 2011 to only 5,500 in 2015-16. And the item that's most significant is that only 50% of the individuals who received approved letters of eligibility, only 50% of those people actually participated in the program in 2015-16. And that's compared to 92% back in 2012. So
Just a
clearly,
quick question. Was that back in the day when it was available to even non-low income individuals if they had
No.
No?
No, that was the fiscal year after we stopped the test-only directed. So it was only low income in 2012. Okay, so clearly something is wrong. For some reason, even those who are eligible to participate, who've received letters of eligibility, they're not participating. So we did some research, and Randy is going to cover some of that research.
So we needed to answer some questions that we had before we could make any proposed changes to the program. And one of those questions, one of the biggest ones, was why we had over 50% of the consumers that were approved for repair assistance not actually participating. And so what we did was we conducted a survey with those consumers that were approved for the program but opted not to use it. And what we found was consumers came back and told us that the initial cost of the diagnosis and the testing was too high. It was too expensive for them to afford, with having the risk of not knowing what the diagnosis would show them. And whether or not their vehicle was going to be repairable within the $500 benefit, or repairable at all. Next, they told us that they're having difficulty finding a Star Test and Repair station that was willing to take their vehicle in and perform the diagnosis and repairs. And our current statistics for this past fiscal year show that over 2,500 of the Star Test and Repair stations that are under agreement with the Consumer Assistance Program, we see approximately 800 to 900 of those stations actively participating with us. So our next question we had is, we had a large decline in approved applications last fiscal year. And so we looked at our statistics. We found that over 3,500 applicants were denied repair assistance because they had lapses in their registrations in the prior 2 years before applying. We looked at our regulations and our statutes. It is required currently by regulation, but is not required by statute. So unfortunately, we've had to deny consumers that would have otherwise been eligible to participate simply because of lapses they had in the previous 2 years. And in many cases, these consumers that are participating in the program simply couldn't afford to pay the registration fees on time. Next, we wanted to look at what's the cost of auto repair today. The Consumer Assistance Program in 2000 started a benefit of $500, so we've been there for 17 years. So we looked at the Consumer Price Index for auto repair in general, and it showed us there's a 60% increase. So repairs that cost $500 back in the year 2000 could easily cost $800 today. So we took this a step further.
We conducted a survey with 17 repair facilities throughout the state of California. We sampled over 1,100 invoices containing emission-related repairs between 2015 and 2017. So this was current data. And what we found out that, well, 66% of those repairs could be done within the $600 or less. Another 20% of those emission-related repairs got performed somewhere between $600 and $1,000. And then 14% of those repairs fell somewhere over $1,000 mark. So what we ended up finding was we had a number of repairs for catalytic converters alone, or catalytic converters as an additional with other repairs that were performed. Next, we found some engine mechanical repairs and transmission repairs. And then we found some repairs that were multiple repairs that did not include a catalytic converter at all.
So just to summarize our findings, we found that approved applicants don't participate in the program because the repairs too often exceed the $500 contribution amount that CAP can provide. We also found that approved applicants do not participate because they have to pay the entire copay up front. And they find this too much of a risk when they're not sure if the car is repairable at all or if it's repairable within the $500 CAP contribution. We find that the percentage of approvals is down because we have regulations that are restricting consumers due to lapses in registration 2 years ago. And we believe that this is unnecessary and counterproductive for our program. Lastly, the approved applicants do not participate because they're telling us they can't find star stations that are willing to work on their vehicle. And often they have to go to multiple star stations before they find somebody who's actually willing to do the repair. So our solution, we have a few proposals to remedy this. One of the proposals is to raise the CAP contribution up to $800 for all vehicles. Additionally, we'd like to provide an additional $400 for certain repairs on 1996 and newer vehicles. And these repairs typically would be something like a catalytic converter replacement, something that is high dollar parts costs and so forth. We would also like to change the consumer copay to a straight 20% of the diagnosis and repair. And we believe that this will make it a lot easier for the consumers. First of all, they only have to pay 20% of the diagnostic fee up front. And they don't have to commit any more funds until they see the results of the diagnosis. And finally, we recommend removing the regulation pertaining to lapses in prior years, lapses in registration in prior years. So remove the requirement to pertaining to lapses in prior years. And finally, I'd like to bring it to our table here. And this is just a comparison between what the current program will cover and what we're proposing will cover. The current program covers, with our $500 contribution, and it has approximately the consumer pays $100 diagnostic copay. That provides up to $600 for diagnosis and repair of the vehicle. That $600, according to this survey we did this year, covers about 66% of the repairs. As you can see from the table, the two right-hand columns there, our program will provide an additional 27%, or we'll be able to repair an additional 27% of the vehicles with this new program. And that's all we've got.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions, comments from the advisory group? Did you? Tracy.
Tracy Renee, Automotive Service Councils of California. So what was to address the issue of consumers not being able to find shops to repair their vehicles? What is your solution for that?
We specifically did not build in a solution to this proposal. It is one of the reasons that we're coming to industry before we put an official regulation package out on this, is we'd like to get some feedback on why that's happening. We have suspicions, but I think we need to hear from the industry regarding why some stations appear not to be participating.
Right. I know as a Gold Shield, you had quarterly reports, quarterly grading of the station. So I think that's one thing you don't have now. There's more freedom there. I do see a lot of, with the copay changed, it used to be $20. These consumers really do struggle, and they really don't have the money to pay for the diagnostics. It's very difficult for a lot of them to come up with that money. So it's not just the diagnostics. It's required a baseline test. So there's a smog inspection, then you have your diagnostics, you have your final smog inspection, the certificate. That could be a lot of money for someone. Another thing is a lot of reasons these vehicles aren't the fees haven't been paid, and all of this stuff is a lot of consumers really believe that they have to have their car smogged first before they can even pay their DMV registration money. And then again, if they know their car already has a problem and it's not going to pass, they're going to take the little money they have to go pay their registration because they don't have any money. So there was something else I made a note here.
Well, there's some correlation, I think you and I were talking, some correlation between some of the studies you've done and some of the comments that Bud made with respect to and Greg in your presentation made with respect to looking at the repairs. So not getting complete repairs potentially. This is a kind of a segment of the vehicle population that may be falling short of what we need in terms of overall emissions reductions or maximum emissions reductions from these vehicles.
Correct.
But you kind of were really focused on that, and Tracy as well.
Right. A lot of disadvantaged communities, end up with the older vehicles. And the new car life is less than 6 years. A person holds on to a new car for less than 6 years, so it's already being thrown out before the first smog's due. So, you have these, anyway, they're.
Okay.
We used to do a lot of CAP when we were Gold Shield, and we really don't see anybody anymore. And we're in an area where there's a lot of low income, eligible people for that. So it's really changed since the program changed from Gold Shield to Star. It's changed a lot dramatically. So.
Yeah, and we're in response to what Pat was saying there. We are hoping that by allowing repair facilities to do more complete and repairs rather than asking them to apply a Band-Aid with $500. We're hoping that that will actually encourage stations to want to participate. But as you noted, that's only part of the equation. Some folks are quite willing to do, Star stations are quite willing to do cap repairs, but they're not getting people coming to their door. One of the things that we have noticed is, particularly in this survey that we did with consumers who didn't participate, is they went to 3 or 4 stations that turned them away. And variety of reasons for that. Some said, we just don't want to do cap cars. Others said, well, we're just too busy right now and we can't take you for a couple of weeks. But either way, they went to several shops and then they got discouraged and they dropped out.
Are they dropping out of the repair and then just retiring the vehicle then and switching it over into a retirement voucher? Or just completely, you never see them again?
In some cases, they're just continuing to drive the vehicle unregistered, is what we're finding. We're not really seeing that much of a transfer to vehicle retirement from those vehicles.
Yeah, there's really no evidence that they're retiring them. They're still on the road.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Rosemary.
Rosemary Shahan, Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety. Thank you very much. This is a program I care a lot about for a lot of reasons, and we like to see more consumers getting out of older, higher polluter vehicles into newer, cleaner, safer cars. There's so many reasons to make that happen. So I've got a bunch of questions. One is, why is there any copay at all? Can we, what's the rationale?
That's required by statute. The statute concerning this, the Repair Assistance Program, requires that BAR pay no more than 80% of the cost of repairs. So we under statute, we have no choice except to charge a minimum of 20% copay.
And does anyone know, like, why that is there? Is it just a cost containment thing, or to make sure the consumer is committed to getting the repair done?
I suspect that part of it is to ensure that the consumer has a stake in repairing the vehicle, because otherwise we might get vehicles into the program that there was really no hope of ever repairing, and those vehicles probably would be better off being retired.
And are the consumers who weren't taking advantage of the CAP program eligible, for the most part, to have their cars retired? And if so, why wasn't that happening?
Okay, well, for some of these people, and as I mentioned in the beginning, there is a gap that the Repair Assistance Program fills that is not covered by vehicle retirement. Some of the folks, well, the folks who apply to our program, as I mentioned, they need their cars to go to work. And $1,500 for a replacement vehicle, sometimes it's not enough to get anything any better. So it doesn't make sense for them. So they're not necessarily going to, just because they don't qualify for repair assistance, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go over to retirement.
Okay. And I'm totally with you on eliminating the restriction if there's a lapse in registration. To me, that never really made sense. And we have so many unregistered vehicles in California.
And the application is one unified application, so they can see their choice right before them, whether I choose the at the fork in the road, the repair scenario or the retirement scenario. Is that's correct, right?
That is correct. Yeah, they can see all over the website and on the application and on the online application, they have a choice for either vehicle retirement or repair assistance.
Yes, Nikki.
Does the applicant still have to provide a tax return? I can't remember.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Does the applicant still need to provide a tax return? I think they did it one time.
A tax return, there are, they might be asked to provide some form of proof that they are low income. And so, and that can take one of many forms. It's not necessarily a tax return.
One person say, well, I want to provide my tax return.
Yeah.
One more question from Tracy before we go to the audience.
Sorry. I just want to make another comment. A lot of consumers, they don't realize, once they have applied for one program versus the other, so you apply for repair, they don't realize that they could possibly switch that and switch it over to retirement. So I think, as the industry, we could educate consumers, help educate consumers a little bit better on the programs as well. I get a lot of customers that come in that didn't even realize there was a program, let alone, the options of the program. So there's just, we could improve our communication to the consumers when they do come in for a smog and if they fail smog. And it would be helpful for them to know what programs are available to them.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Can I just make one other comment?
Yes, Nikki.
I just want to say, we don't do a lot of the CAP program, but when we do it, your department is very helpful. And it's easy when we send the form in and say, can you correct any problems before we fully submit it? So if we do have a problem, we know it before we submit it. So maybe an outreach from your department to more of a STAR program, because I think that's a little bit of a stigma that people are afraid to be submitting the paperwork. But,
yes.
I mean, you are very good about helping us, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've always been very good.
Good job. Pass that on to the staff.
Yes.
Thank you, Nikki, for that.
Thank you.
Other comments and questions? Bud, yes.
Thank you very much, Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. I was thinking I should make some 3x5 cards and just say, okay, 35, so we all know what I'm going to say next. That's it. It's more complicated than you think. That's what I said before. So let me give you kind of the shop perspective of it. One of the things is, and I've actually been at some of the BAG meetings, and we run out of money. And the fund is dry, and the shops don't even know the fund is dry. And they've got customers coming in, they're trying to make fax submittals, and there's no money left. I'd like to at least see maybe a bar blast when the fund's getting low, so the shops know it's getting close, and they can now, whatever they're communicating with the customer, they've got some moves that they can make. Next one is that shop size has a lot to do with it as well. So if in fact a customer comes in and they're going to be one of these CAP cars, the car stays, you fill out the paperwork, customer usually leaves, you do the submittal process, it takes what it takes. Meantime, the clock's running while this is going on. So if it's a relatively small shop, you're taking up an active bay or an active parking area for a car that's not moving. So if you've got one of those and then here comes another one, you're probably not going to take that one because you've got other cars that are moving during the day. So you've got one stuck car that's on CAP, and the other ones, you just got to keep them moving. Now, that might take the rest of that day before you get an approval, and now you're back with the customer talking to them. So now you're on day 2, and then when you've done your diagnosing, it's not turn around and pull the parts. None of these parts you're going to have on your shelf. So now you're ordering stuff, and based on how long it's going to take to get those parts, you may be 2 or 3 or 4 days still with the car on the lot stuck. So guys are trying to figure out how to fit these things in, service the customer, make sure everyone's got a smile on their face when the dust clears, but you've got cars that are turning in the meantime while all this is going on. The next comment I want to make has to do with who does what. Because if you have a four-man crew, I'm saying man, but excuse me, so if you have a four-person crew, two of the people are smog techs and two of them are not, and then maybe there's somebody up in front that's doing the order placing and writing up invoices. Well, one person's doing smog checks, that licensed person. Another one's doing smog repair, perhaps. The other two are doing oil changes and changing belts and hoses and maybe doing brake services. But if, in fact, this cap car needs to have repairs, one of those guys can't do anything. You're stuck with the two guys you got, and one guy's spinning out smog checks, and the other one's working on other repairs that they have coming in, and then runs over to the cap car. I'd like to see almost an apprenticeship type program where some of these guys are working underneath a licensed smog technician who can help do some of this stuff under guidance, so you can take advantage of other crew members that are on staff, so you can help turn some of these cars out. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Excellent comments, Bud. Thank you very much. And especially when we're running low on funds, I think we definitely could do a better job communicating that to the industry, so you know, on the vehicle retirement, we're not having a problem running out of funds and repair assistance, but vehicle retirement, yeah. Okay, Charlie?
Yes, Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. I guess I'm supposed to hold up my cards as to what I'm going to say here. I have here in my hand a picture of a very interesting lady. This lady used to be the secretary, and I had occasion to have a conversation with her in Los Angeles and indicated to her that the Sierra Research, Tom Austin, who was being funded by her to do an evaluation of the smog check program with the 50% failure rate data. And while the Air Resources Board and the Department of Consumer Affairs was funding that, at the same time, I shared with her in person and the director of the Department of Consumer Affairs in person in Los Angeles that, in fact, Sierra Research was on the side being very negative to the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Automotive Repair, and particularly to the chief, due to poor performance and so on and so forth, while he's being funded by her. That was very interesting in that within a very short time frame, she was eliminated from employment in the state of California. The director of the Department of Consumer Affairs was eliminated from employment in the state of California, and the chief went on to other things. So the instant that you start asking any questions and looking at what we're doing here and the performance of what we're doing here, and on the website, on the web, is a conversation between the previous chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair and myself, petitioning her to provide the data from Sierra Research, which they said they had provided to the Department of Consumer Affairs and so on, and that data was not provided to anybody to review until such time as they moved it to the legislature and started implementing legislation. So the deputy secretary called me in, and I had a conversation with him, and he did some very fabulous stuff. And he's, of course, now no longer working for the state of California. That's Mr. Willie Armstrong, PhD. Gentleman working for him who was from the Highway Patrol was being assistant there and trying to do something about this and to create some performance and create some right kinds of outcomes. He and his wife were both dismissed from service in the state of California and sent on to do other things, working at the federal level. When I went to the meeting in Los Angeles, I got there, and what they were doing was reviewing the report to the governor and the legislature of the smog check program, and I think that was the last one. There was a guy sitting in the audience, nobody else in the room but him. I walked in and I said, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm not going to tell you." I said, "Oh, really?" So in this particular meeting, I got up to testify on each item on the agenda, and each and every time I was told I was out of order, I was not following the appropriate conversation that was under discussion, to please sit down and be quiet. When the gentleman got up, who had been sitting in the room to start with, he was from Fed EPA, there to promote and support test only, remote sensing, OBD2 only testing. And so I held up my hand when he finished his conversation, and the chairman and the committee told me to please sit down, be quiet, because I was out of order. I went right ahead and I said, Mr. Gene Tierney, I said, I have a suggestion. Can we put in some sort of an audit program to find out after these repairs if what was actually broken actually got repaired, and find out how the state of California is doing and if we're performing as well as we should? He said, I absolutely support that. So I guess the only way we're going to get this fixed is to get EPA to come in here and disrupt this process, and to get the ex-secretary to disrupt this process, and work on, see if we can do something to actually create some standards that are about promoting and supporting the people that do this program, and treating them like they're important rather than criminals and trying to throw them out of business. We want them to be in business, and instead of taking cars out of the program, we need to add cars to the program, and we can generate 2,000 tons a day in emissions reductions for our state implementation plan, and make some heroes instead of going to the robots and eliminating this whole program and this whole department, which I think is very, very wrong. And I think the consumers deserve better than robots to replace all the jobs in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much. I assume we will start putting pen to paper, start working on some of the regulations to maybe even workshop them but I think this was just a way to kind of get some, kind of spark everybody's interest in the issue. So is that correct?
Yes, that's what we would hope, and we're hoping that people take the time to send in an email or give me a call, comment, and we could use your help putting this together, and would be very interested, and we are going to be working on it very hard in the months to come.
Thank you very much. Hey, Bill. Bill Thomas to give this quarter's enforcement statistics update. This will be the fiscal year end for 2016-17, so you'll have a more complete picture as it relates to a comparison from the prior fiscal year.
That is correct. Thank you, Pat. It's good to be back. My apologies for missing the April meeting. Unfortunately, my attendance was overruled by somebody with more authority than Pat, because it was on the date of my anniversary. So, so I am back, and we'll just get right into it here because we are up against the clock still. And we'll see if my voice holds out. So the first slide, and I'd almost hoped it wasn't the first slide. I may look at changing these in the future, because I would rather talk about this first. I want to talk about trend groupings first, which the pie chart is composed of. So these 7 groups, these tables, are how we group our trends in complaints. And for the new members of the BAG, of the advisory group, I want to reiterate that trends are the area of automotive repair the consumer indicated they were seeking when they engaged in the transaction that led to the complaint. And these trends are reported through conversations from our field reps with the consumer and stated as such. So I just want to make that point clear. Then within each complaint, when we stat these complaints, within each trend, and we only report 1 trend per complaint, so there can't be multiple areas of repair. And then we report up to 3 allegations, and that is what wrongdoing does the consumer allege they were victims of, which led to their complaint. Maybe not the best word, victim, but that's where I landed. So I'll back up our pie charts as composed of those 7 tables. There's actually more. I see that now. And As always, our three greatest areas of repair are engine repair and performance, auto body or collision, and general repair and maintenance, with the other trend areas making up a smaller portion of the pie. So these are those groups in order of number of complaints. So engine repair and performance, we're down slightly in total complaints this year. Overall, our complaints for fiscal 16-17 were flat as compared to 15-16. And again, so there were 4,701 complaints in the 16-17 fiscal year. And again, the allegations, the five top allegations in each area, to stay pretty consistent, and this is the same across the board. Again, you can see general repair and maintenance down a little bit as well. Auto body is up a little bit, and we'll talk about that on a slide near the end, with the allegations remaining consistent year over year. Transmission, fairly flat, same allegations. Smog check, this is one where we get another allegation, improper inspection, and again, a little bit down in the total number of complaints, with the allegations remaining the same. Other, we constantly work at the Bureau to try and get rid of other, because I don't know that a consumer went in had to have other repaired. I'm not even sure what other is, but we will continue to work on that. Used car transactions, slight increase, and we started reporting that last fiscal year, and I think it's been very informative for all of us. False and misleading stays highest there, and generally the consumer didn't understand something related to the transaction. Unlicensed activity, fairly flat. Vehicle warranty, slight increase. And that's our complaint trends slides. This next slide is just our primary business type as of June of 2017. Again, we probably have in the neighborhood of 35,000 ARDs at any given time, with the majority of those always being, and again, this is the automotive repair dealers' reported business when they submit their application, what area of repair they're going to engage in, and general repair is the highest of those. Our auto body inspection program statistics, while surely not in the neighborhood of 1,000 that when the program first was implemented, a number of inspections we do annually was, from what I understand, was in the neighborhood of 1,000 per year. We are increasing. The efforts we're implementing internal in the Bureau with making it easier for consumers to participate are having some effect. So we've had 75, so what is that, 35% increase over last year in the number of inspections requested and performed, and an increase in the number of complaints that were filed as a result of those inspections. Questions?
Jack?
Hi, Jack Molodoff, California Auto Body Association. Thanks, Bill. You mentioned the auto body inspection program and internal efforts to increase participation. What have they been?
What those are is previously in our database, our access database for generating an auto body inspection request to send to the field required a fair amount of information from the consumer to be entered into the database and then generate an inspection request. And so the consumer was on the phone for a fair amount of time answering a bunch of questions with staff to just request an auto body inspection. So we removed all those barriers. Now it's just a matter of your name, contact information, what type of car, and where was the shop. And then that was it. Then we get it to the field. They get in touch with the consumer and gather the necessary information from there to perform the inspection. So that was the biggest one, just lowering the barriers and making it more easy for the consumers to participate.
I think a little more outreach too through Tessa's group.
Yes, there is a video and so forth.
Other questions, comments? Tracy?
Tracy Renee, Automotive Service Councils of California. The used car transactions, I find that interesting. So if that is, how are they getting fed into the Bureau of Automotive Repair versus Department of Motor Vehicles? Complaint form. Process.
Anecdotally speaking, I would say a lot of those complaints, and it's 554 over a year to 12 field offices, so it's a number, but it's not a large number in terms of our overall complaints. But I'd say a lot of those are purchased the car, check engine light came on, something like that. Smog check wasn't done, or at a later date, it failed a smog check, or other mechanical issues with the car that the consumer felt should have been addressed, or they at least should have been informed. So that's where it falls into our.
No, I think it's good to see. Thank you.
Okay.
Rosemary.
Rosemary Shahan, Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety, and I'm glad Tracy asked that question, because I was wondering where complaints about that are categorized, because we still get them from consumers who bought a used car, and sometimes the catalytic converter is completely missing. And if they bought it as is, sometimes they have a lot of difficulty. So
Yes.
we asked them to complain to BART, so I was wondering if that's where
Yes.
those would show up. Okay.
Yes.
And I would like to suggest that maybe for the future that we look at changing the requirement that allows dealers to sell cars that pass smog 2 years prior to the date of sale. 'Cause it's my understanding that's in the statute, and that seems like a bad policy. So if a private person sells a car, it has to have passed smog 90 days
Yes.
prior to sale, but a dealer can have done it 2 years.
Yes.
It could be like way out by the time it's sold, and that seems like a bad policy that we should look at.
Okay. Noted.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tracy again?
To what Rosemary was discussing, we have this law that says, the seller's responsible for selling the vehicle. That's whether you're the dealer or a private citizen. The thing is there's no program in place to care if that's taking, except for dealers, obviously, dealer inventory and all that, smog and safety. But in the private vehicle sales that are going on out there, we see it all the time. People are selling cars, everyone can see it. Everyone knows. You're just selling a car, they're not smogging them. So again, we have this whole, these consumers out there which are least likely to be able to afford to service these vehicles and get them, passing and all of this, taking the little money they have, buying these vehicles, and then they have all these problems and they were not smog certified before they were sold. So because DMV takes the money, DMV will, start report a deposit of fees because, I just bought a car or whatever from you. And they'll start that whole process and, we need a smog. And, you need a smog. And then, so I think the solution is don't take any money until the smog is there, But, because it's just take the money, and now we got all these cars out there that never get even transferred into the right name or whatever, so different subject, but.
Yeah. Excuse me, sorry. That would be a DMV issue, but I will say that we do get some of those complaints as well, where the consumer, it was a private party transaction and the smog certificate wasn't provided, and when they went to get one, it didn't pass, and so then we become involved.
Others? I wanted to ask if it would, when this was initially asked that we include this as part of the bar advisory group as a standing presentation, to be as transparent as possible about our complaint and enforcement statistics, sounded like a good idea, and it still is. I just wonder if, there's not a lot you can see in terms of movement or trends by doing it quarterly. I was wondering maybe just looking at maybe peeling it back to maybe twice a year in January and July. Maybe you could do a half yearly and then the end of the year summary. It just quarterly seems to be a bit much, but we're willing to do it, but.
Well, that would resolve the April issue.
His anniversary date.
Although there is a high probability that this will be delegated down to one of the two managers that works for me after this one. And they're both just sitting in the back going, shaking their heads, no, I don't even need to turn around and look, but.
I just remember at the April meeting, we were trying to make judgment about whether complaint numbers were up or down based on only having 3/4 of data and trying to make a judgment about where things were going, to the trend, so it's a little awkward. And Bud.
Bud Rice Quality Tune-Up Shops. What I'd like to see, in addition to the numbers that you put out there, I think we get a lot of value out of stories. So without naming names, I think if you said, so under the warranty one, let me tell you a story about what's happened here. And tell a story as to what happened, because we can use that. We can take that away and use it and help educate our team, our crew. And that's something you can remember long past leaving this afternoon.
And I think that's an excellent point, too. If we were going to keep this on as a standing agenda item, maybe not go through this report, just hand it out and maybe tell a couple of the stories from that quarter, because that would seem to be more useful to the group. Yeah.
Okay.
We were talking about that idea as well. Okay. Thank you, Bud. Charlie?
You gotta get to sit next to the man. Woo-hoo. Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. This reminds me of, we'll have to say, anecdotal story of somebody who has worked for the Bureau of Automotive Repair, a very efficient person. One of my heroes, as a matter of fact. And he got a complaint from a customer who had purchased a car in a used car lot 2 years before and went and got a smog check because he got a notice and failed for everything possible. And that's back when we did real smog checks. It did visual, functional, tailpipe, timing, and all that funny stuff that obviously nobody cares about anymore. And it failed for everything possible on the smog check. And so he goes out and he contacts the customer. Says, do you mind if I look under your hood? He says, we look under hoods. Oh, yeah, look under your hood and see what you got here and verify what's going on, and found that, in fact, what she had indicated with the smog check that she had was valid. There was nothing on the car that passed, nothing. And he says, do you mind if I try to help you with this? She goes, no, that'd be good. So he goes to the smog check station that certified her car 2 years before and got the data for that used car lot and goes to the used car lot. And all the cars on the lot was unlocked. So he opened the hood on every car opened the hoods, there we go again. Opened the hoods on every car on the lot and found that every car on the lot was a serious, serious failure, every one of them. So he talks to the dealer, and the dealer said, well, we don't get any of them smogged until after we sell them. He said, really? He says, I happen to have all the data of all the cars that you certified, that every one of them's on the lot, and it says every one of them's been certified here. He said, I'd like to see two things. I'd like to see this customer's car fixed, and I'd like to see the cars on your lot fixed, and I'll be back. The next following day, the deputy chief at the Bureau of Automotive Repair called this gentleman and said, we don't do that. We just had the head lobbyist for the used car dealers in here, and he took the skin off of my face, and if you ever step your foot on a used car lot again, you're fired. Now, that's been changed in the interim since this story happened, but that was a comment. He goes back 30 days later, the customer's car is fixed, every car on the lot is fixed. This didn't happen with one station, it happened with several stations, and every one of those stations' relationship with the Bureau of Automotive Repair at that moment became excellent and permanent, with one exception. There was one group of stations that basically said, nah, we can get away with this, and they were very quickly out of business. So there's a procedure where there was no threats, there was no actions other than performance instantaneous, permanent change and a permanent improved relationship with the Bureau of Automotive Repair and consumers actually being taken care of that we could do, and we could try and see if it works. But we refuse to do anything to find out if what's broken ever gets fixed. We're afraid to even ask anybody to do something. Oh, my God, there isn't any regulation covering that. And we go try to get fear to move everybody, and nobody moves. And our program is at risk, and the robots are coming unless we do something about it now. Would a petition a possibility of us doing a little pilot? This gentleman right here could run this little pilot study out of his back pocket without even thinking about it because he's that smart. And we can create some improvements in the performance of this organization and provide some heroes for the state of California to the rest of the world that we, in fact, have it together and give a damn. Thank you.
Thank you again, Charlie. I learned that I'm not.
Thank you, Charlie.
In that story, I think. Go ahead, Bill.
No. That was it. Just thank you for the compliment.
Yeah,
So.
thank you. Okay, moving along. I don't, any other comments on this agenda item? We are running past our 12:30 estimated end time for the meeting. Our final, well, two more agenda items. Public comment on items not on the agenda.
I have one.
Yes, Nikki.
I'm representing Cali BC now, so change my.
Oh, yeah, John had to leave.
Yeah, let me change my hat for a second. We've come to the awareness that O'Reilly's has ARDs now, and we want to know if they have to meet the same standards as general ARDs do, as far as paperwork and all of the other things like information and things like that. I think that's an important question.
Yes, estimate and authorization requirements of the Automotive Repair Act are required of any automotive repair dealer. And they did just recently submit applications and were registered 500 plus stores.
How are you enforcing that?
Enforcing the estimate and authorization requirements, the same as we do with other ARDs, I think through consumer complaints and things like that as they come up, and educating the industry, in particular a chain this large, Right It Right presentations, things like that. Bud, is this on this question or a comment, or is it something else?
This is on things not on the agenda.
Okay, sure.
So I'm hopeful that we can put on the agenda for a future meeting online service providers versus brick and mortar. That's really loosey-goosey so far as what they do and how they do and what their parameters are.
So we did have a presentation at our last advisory group meeting. You're something beyond that, I'm gathering, and maybe we can flesh that out in terms of where you want to see us take that presentation or enhance or expand upon that presentation we gave. And it is on our website. All the presentations from all of our BAG meetings, our advisory group meetings are on our website. Okay, thank you. I've made a note of that. Yes, Charlie.
So my understanding, this is the public comments, things not on the agenda portion of the meeting, is that right?
Public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
Since the year 2000, I have been working with a train wreck that has still not been resolved in any way, shape, or form. PZEV warranties. The consumer is still getting, the shaft is not getting what the law requires. And the only thing I've ever gotten is that, have the consumer file a complaint with us and we'll do something about it. That's never going to happen. It hasn't happened to date. We've been having the same conversation for 3 decades, and it's still the same, since the year 2000, and we still have done nothing to find out what it takes for the PZEV warranties. And I'm not in favor of all these cars going to the dealer to get free work. Not at all. I'm interested in seeing people go ahead and fix the car. Just put a little comment on there, this car may be covered under warranty, and I'm giving permission to this guy that doesn't get the warranty money to fix my car and pay him. That's fine. I have no problem with that. We've not done anything to find out if that system does anything other than cheat and lie and create illusions, when in fact we don't ever fix any cars that I can find any evidence of unless we provide a copy of a complaint form for the Bureau of Automotive Repair stating what the process is, what the rules are, and no names, no dealer name, no names of anybody, even the consumer, and give that to the dealer and say, well, what is this? I don't know anything about this. I'm not too smart. And by golly, right away that car gets fixed because the Bureau of Automotive Repair can remove the ARD if that gets uncomfortable. But that ain't going to happen until such time as somebody actually goes in and audits, as we had in the immediate past discussion that I had, where a guy goes in and finds out what's going on there and tells the dealer that he'd like to see those cars fixed, and by golly, they got fixed. No threats, no big dollars, virtually no cost at all. He actually got his job threatened because he was actually trying to do something to make something work. It's time for that audit of the PZEV to take place. And that's what you and I went to talk to the director about, Mr. DeRay. And we gave specific instructions, and those so far have been completely ignored. It's a matter of accommodating what it says on the label and what the letter that was sent to the legislature indicates, that we needed an audit to determine after the entries in the Smog machine that the car doesn't pass. A small percentage of those go to the referee for a review. We still are bound to determine we're not going to do anything about that, or somebody is. So I'm putting my 2 cents out there that I think that's still appropriate to consider and petition your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other public comment on items not on the agenda? Rosemary.
Rosemary Shahan, Consumers for Auto Reliability and Safety, and we've been working with a lot of groups that are also working with NHTSA to improve compliance with the Takata airbag recall, and I know that presents a lot of challenges, and one of the problems we run into is consumers who are afraid to go to the dealership to get the repair done. And there are a host of reasons for that. I won't go into them now in the interest of saving time. But I'm wondering if there's any restriction on dealers performing those repairs off-site, like at the consumer's home or place of business, if we can coordinate that. As far as the Bureau is concerned, is there any reason the dealer mechanics, assuming that they can have all the necessary parts and proper disposal of the replaced parts, etc.?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Go ahead, Tim, real quickly. We've been doing some work on the Takata airbag issue as well, and maybe a presentation on some of our efforts, because we are out of time here, and it isn't agendized, but for the next advisory group meeting, we could do something on some of the internal efforts working on this issue.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do so. We'd be happy to do so. And yeah, I could just say, based on the information presented, no, there would be no specific restriction against an ARD, including a dealer doing work at a location other than the brick and mortar location for which they hold their registration. So nothing on the face of it would prevent that, at least from our end. But yeah, I'm glad you bring up the Takata airbag recall and Chief DeRay as well. I'd like to use, and we'd be happy to come back and present more information on this, but yeah, I would like to acknowledge our supervisor of the Sacramento field office, one of those supervisors, Mr. Lutfi, and his staff, who actually engaged in a partnership, a coordinated effort with NHTSA, and reached out personally to over 500 motorists that we know to be operating some of the most prone vehicles. So thank you. It's a concern I think we all share in motorist safety. So thank you, Patrick, and staff of the Sacramento field office.
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I've heard that some auto repair shops have volunteered to help identify the cars and notify the consumers. I think that's great and a real credit to the industry and a real public service.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you,
Thanks,
Chief.
Tim. Anything else? All right. Our final item before we adjourn is just to announce that our next bar advisory group meeting will be on Thursday, October 19th, 2017, and it will be at the other DCA headquarters building, HQ1. This room is known as this building is HQ2. So that's again Thursday, October 19th through 2017. We'll set it up at 9:30 and probably go till 1. I think we tried to see if we could squeeze this in a 3-hour time slot, but as we saw, so we're pushing 1 o'clock right now. One final thing, as we set the list of the dates for the 2018 advisory group meetings, some consideration. I just want to, we don't have to answer it today, but give some thought, the advisory group members, to maybe moving to different parts of the state. There was talk of maybe having a Southern California from some parties, maybe moving it around to a couple locations, with probably at least two here in Sacramento. Seems to work, but there was some interest in maybe moving it around a little bit so others could attend who are outside the Northern California area. So we'll give some thought to that and would appreciate some feedback from all of you on that. All right, we are going to adjourn, but one final announcement. We are having a workshop, a regulatory workshop, again in this room, starting at 2 o'clock. Give everybody close to an hour to get something to eat and return here for those who want to participate. I look forward to seeing you back at 2 o'clock. Thank you again. Very busy agenda. We got through it. Thank you all for your patience and have a good rest of the summer. We are adjourned.
Yeah,